Good evening, everyone. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have Deputy Clerk tonight serving for us, Mr. Eaton. Thank you. If you'd read or do the roll call.
Absent is George Pond, who's excused. Monica Duran,
Here.
Janice Hoppy,
Present.
Zachary Urban,
Present.
Christy Davis,
Here.
Tim Fitzgerald,
Here.
Larry Matthews,
Here.
Genevieve Wooden.
Present.
We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the council minutes of June 26th and/or July 10th? Hearing none, those are approved as presented to us. We do have a presentation tonight. Patrick Roberts with Martin and Martin, are you here? Here he is. Would you please come forward, because you're going to present the Public Sector Engineer, right up there, Engineer of the Year Award.
Wow, top billing. That's a bit scary. I'm Patrick Roberts. I'm the immediate past president for the National Society of Professional Engineers of Colorado. Recently, we're a nonprofit organization that really supports some things that you be aware of would be math counts or bridge building. And what the mission of NSPE is to provide licensed and ethical practice of engineering. I recently nominated Mark Westberg from the city of Wheat Ridge, as I work with him quite a bit throughout a lot of projects in the city of Wheat Ridge. I find him to be invested in his time, invested in the projects, and it usually leads to success for the projects. Mark, 2017 Public Sector Engineer of the Year.
Shut up, General. No PowerPoints for this one. No PowerPoints for this one. It would be the shortest one ever. I really appreciate this. I got this a few weeks ago, and I really appreciate it. We don't, like most city staff, we don't work to get these. We just work to do our jobs and do a good job, and it's nice to get recognized. Thanks.
Mark is definitely one of our favorites. He does a great, great job. And when he does speak, he speaks clearly, maybe a little long, but always clearly and informative. Okay, let's move on to the citizens' right to speak, starting with those who wish to speak on any matter not on the agenda. Once again, we hold all, 3 minutes on all public right to speak. Please, let's see. Dorothy Archer. Dorothy, if you'll give your name, spelling the last name, as well as your address, please.
My name is Dorothy Archer, Archer. I live at 3640 Marshall Street. Mayor Jay, council, staff, and guests, I'm asking you to take this serious matter to a study session. Last fall, you took the matter of a 35-foot home with a flat roof into consideration and voted to include a 15-foot bulk plane. Thank you. Today, I would like to take it further. I have canvassed about 8 to 10 miles of residential areas within the Wheat Ridge Range and found 5 three-story homes, all of which had extremely large lots. Since all residential zones, excluding R1C and R3, have a straight 35 flat top allowance. I'm asking that that 35-foot structure be removed, and a 25-foot or two-story home with a 15-foot roof, slanted roof, whatever you want to call it, in its place. The homes west of Kipling are mostly two-story, some 3 stories. Those of us who are east of Wheat Ridge or east of Wadsworth are predominantly Zone 2, also a close area of west of Wadsworth. Some homes have good-sized lots, others small. Large home, 2 stories, bi-level, garden level, need much larger lots, width as well as depth. I am asking you to take into consideration the removal of the 35-foot apartment home be removed. I am not asking for stopping progress. A 2-story home is within reach, 12.5 or a 15-foot bulk plane be considered. I canvassed around 50 homes recently and have spoken to so many great Wheat Ridge residents. They emphasized how much they love Wheat Ridge as it is. Small town atmosphere and the feeling of community. They do not want homes bought, scraped, and 3 stories built next to them. Affordable housing, if there is such a thing left, is of great concern. You must stop what's happening in North Denver from coming into Wheat Ridge. Thank you. And those of you here with your cul-de-sac situation, you're all in a zone where you can be scraped in a house 3 stories.
Thank you, Dorothy. Tom Slattery, followed by Jeanette Lloyd. And Jeanette, we're going to have a lot of speakers tonight, so if you're ready, that would be great. Or line up.
Thomas Slattery, Slattery, 6869 West 32nd Avenue. In conjunction with what Mrs. Archer just said, I would like to point out under the present zoning ordinance, given the bulk plane in an R1 zoning, you can have a residence 60 feet wide facing the street, approximately 83 feet deep. This would be a flat roof 3-story building. I think that's incompatible with our R1 zoning. It's just as bad in R2 because you can have a duplex of exactly the same dimensions. 35 feet wide, flat roof, 3-story, 60-foot street frontage, 83-foot depth. For single family in R1 zoning, you can have a residence 35 foot wide. Again, we're talking 3 stories, flat roof. 35 feet wide by about 60 foot deep. I don't think any of these allowances are compatible with our residential neighborhoods, and I encourage that the city reconsider it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Jeanette Lloyd, followed by Joan Blanchard.
I want to speak on the same topic as the previous 2 people. Speaking from experience of a friend of mine, she lives on 39th and Stewart, adorable, cute little house. As one of my Cub Scouts who has severe allergies, wonderful vegetable garden, growing most of her own food because of her son's health issues, ended up with a house on each side that was one of those big box, ugly houses. She ended up having to move because it took away all of her sunlight, could no longer have a vegetable garden. Her bills went up a lot in the wintertime because she no longer had sunshine that's shown on her house to keep her house warm because of being surrounded by these big houses. They don't fit in with the neighborhoods. They don't fit in with what Wheat Ridge has been. I was born and raised in Wheat Ridge, went to Stevens Elementary, Wheat Ridge Junior High, Jefferson High. My father still lives in the same house he's been in since I was an infant. We've seen the neighborhood change. This is not a change we want to see.
Thank you. And Joan Blanchard, followed by Bud Starkler. Oh, Jeanette Lloyd? Yeah. Okay. For the record, that was Jeanette Lloyd, 4320 Newland. Lloyd was Lloyd. And now we have Joan Blanchard, and we need the spelling on your last name as well as your address.
Joan Blanchard, last name Blanchard, 3295 Kendall Street. My concern is not only the lack of sunlight these people are suffering from, but also the privacy that is impacted when you have a 3-story building right next to you. It impacts what you do in your backyard, and I think that is a real concern when you start changing the scenery in your neighborhood. So I'm against that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Bud Starker, followed by Lynn Craig.
Good evening. My name is Bud Starker, and I live at 3019 Eaton Street in Wheat Ridge. You spell that Budstarker, Starker. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Councilors, citizens of Wheat Ridge. My name is Bud Starker, and I'm honored to announce tonight that I'm a candidate for mayor of Wheat Ridge. As a longtime resident, I know and love this city, its people, its parks, its rural feel, its promise for the future. My wife and I raised our family here. Mary's here. Mary, can you raise your hand? She's in the back row. She was didn't want to get too close to me, I guess. We lived in this community. We built and operated a restaurant called West 29th. I hope you'll join us. I've served as a member of the Building Code Advisory Council. I've sat up here on the dais as a city councilor, and I was mayor pro tem. I've been active in the social, civic, and business life of our community. I wasn't born in Wheat Ridge. My father was in the service, and I grew up in many places around the country and a few around the world. But when we moved to Wheat Ridge 42 years ago, with a dozen chickens, a goose and a gander, a goat and a dog, I knew this was a special place. A place where mountain vistas and cooling breezes blew. A place where the sun seems to shine just a little bit brighter, Mr. Goff. We chose to stay here, to raise our family here, to make this our home, and to make this our community. I spent my 45-year career as a commercial construction industry, advancing from carpenter to superintendent and company owner. I gained experience and knowledge to build a successful project. You must engage and excite people in a common purpose. You must have a clear vision and seek broad and diverse opinions. Have dedication and commitment to see a project through to its successful completion. This is the essence of leadership. Our city is on the cusp of a great leap forward. We have needs we must meet and visions we must fulfill for our future. I will bring leadership, experience, and commitment to these efforts. And as your mayor, I will work with you to make our neighborhood safe and secure, build new opportunities for economic growth and financial stability, conserve the rural feel and quality of the life we enjoy, create an open and respectful dialogue among all of our citizens. Over the next several months, I will be listening to our community and our hopes for the dreams and for the future. I look forward to meeting and hearing your ideas and your concerns. I have been a builder all of my life, and as your mayor, and with your help, we will build a better, brighter future for Wheat Ridge. I ask for your support and your voice, because this buds for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bud. Lynn Craig, Did he bring a band too? Is there a band out there?
Hello, I'm Lynn Craig, Lynnecraig, and I live at 3675 Marshall Street. And I don't know all of the technical details of zoning, but I do know that I viewed the recent house built on 2921 Chase Street. This is a huge 3-story flat roof house on a narrow lot, and I was wondering if this is the future of Wheat Ridge. A house of that size and shape does not fit into a neighborhood of small single-story homes on small lots. The house is huge and it looks like an apartment house. The neighbors must really dislike it, and I certainly do, and I don't think it enhances the neighborhood at all. And I certainly do not look forward to our future if that's going to be what our future is. I am sure that street parking will be a challenge if these huge houses are built on narrow lots, because I know everybody has at least 2 vehicles, and so they will inevitably be parking on the street. I don't think that allowing this type of house is fair to the neighbors, and they have no privacy and little sunlight. I think it is time that we reconsider our building codes and zoning laws, and I would like us to see that we maintain our friendly family atmosphere and our small, vibrant communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm sorry. No, that was Lynn Craig. Now I need Jesse Garcia.
Yes, my name is Jesse Garcia, Garcia. I live at 3660 Marshall Street, next door to Dorothy Archer, actually. And I'm in full support of her opinions as to Wheat Ridge should head. I've been living at this residence for 17 years now. I lived on 17th and Lowell in Denver, and I saw my mother-in-law's duplex go down to rubble and then square buildings built all over the neighborhood. So I hope that Wheat Ridge is not going to be looking like that. So I'm hoping that you reconsider, like Lynn said, and change the zoning to where, at least in the Wheat Ridge area, that there will not be any flat roof homes, 3-story stall, and obscuring the sunlight and actually the view of the mountains. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Laura, I can't quite pronounce this. She lives on Harlan Street. Laura, come up and spell it and pronounce it for us.
G-R-A-P-A-U, Laura.
You were right, Drapo.
Didn't expect to speak, but I live at 4280 Harlan. And we had a gentleman move in next to us who built a slide addition. And what he did is, we were on kind of a slope, he built it up, and I basically have a 3-story next to me. It's not real wide, but it now it went from a 1-family to a 3-family. Number one. Number two, this gentleman died a year ago, and my husband and I talked to the council and came in and talked to people and the engineers and all that, and basically they told us that when he died that they would settle things in our neighborhood. Well, he's been gone a year and things are still the same. Okay, that's number two. Number three, he put in a 3-story, and when they go up their stairs, you can't open any of the windows on my south side of my house or you can't open the curtains in the windows because they can see right in. And the same thing he put a big, huge picture window in his garage, and he looks out on my backyard. So, speaking from, at least I have nobody on the north side, so I at least still have air, and I can go out on the street and see the mountains. But we really need to think about what we want. I was down on 36th and Navajo, and if you've been down in that neighborhood, I literally went down there and did not recognize it. They have taken those homes over. The whole neighborhood has changed, and we need to encourage people to build and to do good things, but we need to really take a look at what they're building and what they're doing to the people that are there. You know, I can get up and move, I suppose. I can sell my home. There's lots of people. We get bids all the time, you know, we leave little things. You want to sell your house? You want to buy your house, you know? But my question is, I can sell my house, where do I move to? You know, I like where I'm at. I like the people in my neighborhood. I like the feel of my neighborhood. I walk every night, you know, and I'm not worried. I mean, I don't worry about walking. I walk to Sheridan, I walk to Pierce, or however long. I don't worry about it. I know my neighborhoods. When you have that many people, you have no parking, you have no privacy, and basically, you know, the way real estate is in Colorado now, you can't even begin to buy what you've got here elsewhere. Just my opinion.
Thank you very much.
I believe that's the end of public comment as far as the open public comment roster. We will now move to the first item on the agenda. Let me check here where we're at. First, I need to approve the agenda. Are there any changes in tonight's agenda? Nope. Then we can go on, and let's move on to our item number 1. Mr. Fitzgerald. Weren't quite ready.
Okay, resolution number, Resolution number 22-2017, a resolution approving a 7-lot subdivision plat for property zoned residential 1, R1, at 11435 West 32nd Avenue with a cul-de-sac length variance, which is case number WS-16-02 and WA-17-07 Mirkwood Estates. This is a public hearing and a resolution.
Actually, this is a continuation of a public hearing from June 26, which I'm reopening or continuing the opening. And we're going to start with, we do need to swear in. Anybody who is going to speak on this item tonight, please stand and raise your right hand. And do you swear to tell the whole truth in these matters? If so, respond by saying, I do. Thank you. And let's move on with staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Jay. Ken Johnstone, City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Director. And in the spirit of this being a continuance of the request from June 26th, the public hearing was kept open. And I will just kind of continue the conversation from there and not rehash all the discussion that was had. I think most of the people in the room and council are familiar with the case and familiar with the discussion that occurred at the previous public hearing. So with that, I'll jump into it. This is a depiction of the aerial for the area. The red arrow points generally to the site, which is a long, narrow lot that fronts on 32nd, extends north across the Lena Gulch, and really, truly meets the definition of an infill residential development, kind of the last piece on this block, adjacent to subdivisions on the east and west and the parking lot for the Applewood Baptist Church. As you can see with the 2 black arrows, there are 2 existing street right-of-ways, which went away, but right here, where 33rd Avenue right-of-way is extended from the fairly recently platted Quail Hollow subdivision plat, and then on the opposite side, 33rd Avenue was stubbed out from Route Street in a subdivision plat that was actually approved in the 1980s. So the 33rd Avenue right-of-way exists there, stubbed into the site. As a result of that, this is the original subdivision design that was presented to City Council in June. The gray area is the street. This would be the extension of 33rd Avenue across from those 2 existing terminuses of right-of-way. So the termini of 33rd in Quail Hollow and the termini of 33rd here as an extension of Route Street. Route Street's located right here. So the proposal at that time had been to extend 33rd Avenue here. That would provide access to the lot 7, which is the large lot to the north. And then all the way down here, proposed Robb Street would provide access for the other 6 lots. 32nd Avenue had not been considered as an access point for a variety of reasons, mostly related to grade, but we can speak to that if you have questions of that in council questions and comments. There was substantial discussion, obviously, at the public hearing in June, notably around concerns with the potential for traffic to cut through on this new street from the Quail Hollow subdivision over to Route Street, concerns that there is a nearby school and that some of that traffic would be associated with the school as an alternative route, and in the opinion of many in attendance would be a negative impact to the neighborhood. Based on that feedback, council's discussion and feedback to staff was to consider some additional design options that could help assuage the concerns of the 2 neighborhoods and come to a mutually agreeable conclusion. So in that spirit, the developer has submitted a couple alternatives that were part of your packet. Excuse me. And I'll go through those. So this is option 1, as it's referred to in the staff report. And option 1 would simply take the existing right-of-way that's terminated in the more recently platted Quail Hollow subdivision and extend that street down Robb Street in the exact same alignment and configuration as it was proposed in the previous submittal. There would be no connection made to Route Street in this design other than a sidewalk that would extend to provide pedestrian connectivity. And you can see that again down here in a more detailed picture. So again, 33rd terminating in Quail Hollow here, extending south towards for the new Robb Street access, a private driveway into lot 7, and a public sidewalk over to the Route Street cul-de-sac. Option 2 would be a proposed connection from Route Street. So taking the existing cul-de-sac of Route Street and building a local street with sidewalks on both sides, and then hooking that street down into the new Robb Street, which provides access. Same thing with lot 7, it would gain access directly from 33rd Avenue, but no connection would be made to 33rd Avenue in this location. The existing cul-de-sac terminus would remain in place, and that's the option 2, the option connecting from Route Street. Additionally, and kind of subsequent to that initial resubmittal, the applicant, in the spirit of working with the neighborhood, had hosted a neighborhood meeting, I think a week ago Sunday, and come up or presented some additional options. These are referred to as options A through D, and you see that reference in some of the communications that you've received in your packet from some of the neighbors and public who were at that meeting and commenting on with their opinions on these options A through D. I'll start by referencing options C and D, because options C and D are really parallel the options 1 and 2 in our staff report. So option 1 is the same as option C, so connecting 33rd Avenue from Quail Hollow and no connection to Route Street. And option D is really option 2 in our staff report, making the connection into this new subdivision from Route Street. Options A and B are different iterations of that. Notably, option A would proposes to have a sidewalk connection through that existing right-of-way over to Route Street, but also proposes to make that a dedicated city pocket park with, either in the existing right-of-way or in some manner vacating that right-of-way. Option B here, you can see, proposes to eliminate any pedestrian connectivity from this existing, this new subdivision over to Route Street. We haven't conducted any kind of a thorough analysis of these 2 proposals, and they both probably require some additional design considerations and some additional procedures. Notably, right-of-way can't be vacated without a separate right-of-way vacation ordinance, so that's a technical matter. There'd have to be an application for a vacation of that right-of-way that would be initiated by the adjacent 2 property owners.
We haven't, as a policy matter, typically accepted these small pocket parks as a type of dedicated pocket park, just because the small nature of them, they're very expensive on kind of a per square footage basis to maintain. So the city has not, as a policy matter, accepted those. And in terms of option B, with the elimination of the sidewalk connection, we do think there's value in connecting that existing Route Street neighborhood along this local street, or over to this local street, and then over to the nearby school has a lot of value. So I think we'd prefer sticking with options 1 and 2, or options C and D as they're shown on this document. We have provided an analysis of the variance criteria. Either option 1 or 2 or C and D do require a cul-de-sac length variance. So we have provided that analysis in your packet and do believe that those variance criteria can be supported. So in terms of council action, we do have options 1 and 2 for your consideration. Option 1, extending 33rd from Quail Hollow. Option 2, extending Route Street. The CAF provides language that allows you to incorporate one of those 2 options into your motion, and Resolution 22 includes the language approving the subdivision as well as a cul-de-sac variance. And again, I already have really gone through option A and B. Neither of those are included in the current language, so if you're inclined to consider any of those options, you'd need to add appropriate language in the motion. And I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Ken. Council, we have discussed this before, but we have some changes, and go ahead and ask your questions.
Thank you, Ken. Can you tell us in feet with the difference between option A and then option B?
In terms of how long the cul-de-sac is?
Yeah, from connection to 32nd.
The Route Street, excuse me, it's in the staff report. If I could just, option 1 is a 1,300 foot cul-de-sac. Option 2 is about a 1,500 foot cul-de-sac. Yep.
Other questions? The decision has to be made at this point from the council, not only the extension of the cul-de-sac, but as well as choosing between option 1 and option 2. Is that correct? Yeah, yeah.
And the public hearing is still open, so additional public.
Oh, of course, of course. I just kind of wanted to, have them aware. This would be the time for the applicant, if the applicant would like to speak as well, and then we'll follow by public testimony.
Hello again.
Your name?
My comments are pretty brief tonight. I think that this...
Please give us your name again.
Sorry. My name is Steve Merker. I'm the developer and the applicant for the Mirkwood Estates project.
And your address?
My address is 6990 West 38th Avenue, Suite 300.
Thank you.
This option 1 and option 2 are kind of the result of taking into consideration the city's feedback and also the neighborhood's feedback. And we had a city meeting specifically about this, and I think we've been able to meet all the design criteria in option 1. That is the one that we prefer, is option 1. We met with the neighborhood. The neighborhood prefers option 1 as well. That maybe they could speak about it. I think there are a couple of people here about it as well. There has been a lot of good feedback from both sides, and so if you guys are trying to consider one that takes everybody's perspective into consideration, I think that option 1 is the best. Now, I will say that out of the A, B, C, and D, option A is obviously the preference. With the pocket park, the city has let me know that they have not provided any response or comments on the pocket park. That would be a very cool option, obviously, for everybody in the neighborhood. So if that's a possibility, then, take that into consideration. But that's all the real information I have to add. I think everything else has been ferreted out, we meet all the criteria for a variance. So I hope that you take that into consideration.
Thank you. Council, have any questions of the developer? Okay, let's begin public testimony. And I have several people signed up here. I'm going to ask public testimony, if you would, since there are several of you, please hold it to 3 minutes, as well as if you, maybe you could leave, we had a lot of public testimony before, and it's all recorded in our minds and in our minutes. If you would give us information about the options as well as the variance, although I think that sounds pretty much given. That would be appreciated, so that we have lots of good information that the council can glean from. Bruce Kroll, let's start with you, followed by Jason Glass.
Good evening, my name is Bruce Kroll. I'm KRAL.
Thank you.
Fire Marshal with West Metro Fire, located at 433 South Allison Parkway in Lakewood. So in looking at the proposals and the comments from last week, I have to mention that in merging with the Wheat Ridge Fire Department, West Metro has certainly gained a strong appreciation for the community of Wheat Ridge, and we love the feel that the community has. So we have no interest in upsetting any established neighborhoods. We also don't have any interest in upsetting the ability for people to buy and build and grow. So we're in that in-between place as well. So I thought it was important, at least for you as the representatives of the community making this decision, you have some basic fire information concerns about the development of the proposed solution. So there is fire code requirements for how long a cul-de-sac can be, and after 150 feet it has to have a turnaround. So you can see the fire code starts to be alarmed, no pun intended, at 150 feet. So when you're talking about something that's 1,300 to 1,500 feet long with no way to get out, that's a concern. It's a hazard. The reason it's a hazard is if a house is on fire, there's 5 fire apparatus, a couple of command cars, a couple of ambulances, as well as a police presence that have to fit in proximity to that burning house. And the first fire engine or 2 are going to connect to a fire hydrant and put a 5-inch round fire hose in the street, more narrowing our ability to get in and out quickly. So the potential in a dead end is that we will have people that need to go to the hospital, and we got to get them in an ambulance. We can't get the ambulance on the street. So don't take my comments lightly about affecting the community or affecting the developer, but the fact remains is if you want to have a substantial fire response that's effective, you have to consider these long cul-de-sacs and what they might do to the residents. 20 years from now, they have no idea they're living on a cul-de-sac that doesn't comply with the fire code. So what I would say is the best solution, I think, has already been taken off the table, and that was making 33rd go through, giving a couple options to back around and get out of the way for an ambulance or a fire truck to come and go, or laying hose in the street, we can get around it. So that would be the best of the worlds for emergency response. Obviously, you have other things to consider, not just emergency response. The second option that we would be the least affected by, but still not the best solution, is having the option 1, with some stipulations for how to mitigate the hazard that we're creating when developing that lot by having a 1,300-foot dead end. So some of the things that occur to me is putting sprinklers in the homes. Now, we could have a study session on what those are if you want more information about it, but the basic idea is those sprinklers give people a little bit more time to get out of their house. So we're not necessarily going to save the structure, but at least when we get there, we get set up best we can in this tight area, people are outside and safe. So that's one thing I would ask is if we do some compromise with option 1, that we mitigate some of that hazard with sprinklers in the homes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have a sense that you would like to ask a question. Do you mind staying for? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Would you,
as the fire marshal, consider maybe additional hydrant placing along the street? Instead of, I'm not sure what the standard spacing is, but instead of having one at each end of the cul-de-sac and maybe just one in the middle, additional hydrant spacing to offset some of the liabilities of the long cul-de-sac?
That's a great point. And we would require that. I would just like put that out there as an option. We would require that because, again, like I said, laying fire hose in the street for any length is going to block that part of the street functionally for any more fire apparatus. So we would have to put in closer spaced fire hydrants so we minimize how much street we're going to block.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Urban?
Thank you. As it relates to the placement of that fire hydrant and the location of that, it would be determined by the district as it relates to that location, or the developer, or both, or how does that placement get determined?
Some of both. We have our judgment requirements, but then you have to look at what's under the street and where the water main is and what we can actually achieve. So there's some latitude, and we don't have to just say, well, it's here or else.
Sure.
So there's some latitudes of where we fit that in between houses to make the houses livable, people back in the room, they can have a driveway.
And not knowing this particular area, but I'm assuming we have fire hydrants already in place in this area, but given the request to have an extended cul-de-sac in this, or dead-end street in this area, and the need to have additional hydrants in this area, is it plausible to place additional fire hydrants on this street if this is approved, or is that, okay?
There'll be water going down there supply the houses.
Okay.
That should work out with fire hydrants.
And it's the same water line, so to speak, versus, it's not a separate system, it's...
I think so. I haven't looked at the utility plans in a long time. But
Sure.
It depends on some if there's a leaked water line. A dead-end water line down the street wouldn't fit the bill because you can't suck all that water out of one dead-end pipe.
Sure. But would it be a need to have one additional fire hydrant for that, or is it an additional 3 or 4 fire hydrants?
It's probably 1 or 2 additional, because it's not really that many houses there.
Okay. And then the cost to install that fire hydrant, is that a cost incurred by the district or the city or the developer, or?
We put as much as possible on the developer. It's our standard here.
Just making sure we're clear. Thank you.
Ms. Wooden?
My question was regarding the cost also. So the cost of building 6 homes now with sprinklers required, that cost would also fall on the developer, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Ms. Hoppy?
So my question is in regard to the lot that is next to this lot is a church parking lot. And it appears as though it's a stone wall, but it has kind of like holes in it currently. Would it be something, if it was imperative, would it be something where if there was water access on the other side of that wall, that you guys would be able to reach the homes that way? Or if the developer had discussed something with the church to be able to have some sort of emergency access through that parking lot, would that be something you guys would be able to consider as the fire department, as safety?
It's something we could consider. A couple things have to take place. Is one, we have to have a way to get through there. The other is the church has to agree to an easement that somewhere down the road they don't sell it to an apartment building, and apartment building says, oh no, we want to have a
road there.
So the church would have to agree to an easement.
I have a question.
Ms. Davis?
So I have just a question based off of what you were saying. Some of it's about the hydrants, but what I'm hearing is a lot about getting all the cars in and out of a very long cul-de-sac, correct? So if you need an ambulance to get in there and you've got 2 fire trucks and the squad car, or whatever you call them, it's hard to get all those cars moving in the cul-de-sac. So that, the hydrants may be an issue, but a lot of it is just getting the equipment in there and to help the people if people need help.
Correct. The hydrants solve or address some of the issue of having the hose in the street making that as short as possible. But in the end, the fire code is about having function in an emergency. And looking at the drawing, you're seeing it in its best condition. You're not seeing it full of snow with trash cans and parked cars. So that's something to keep in mind too, when deciding to have that long of a day.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Urban had another question?
When we talk about the requirement for sprinkler systems within the structures, how does that balance against the installation of additional fire hydrants along the street? And where does that come into play as it relates to, is it both of those requirements are necessary, or is it with the installation of additional fire hydrants, the requirement for sprinkler systems within the structures are no longer required, or how does that play out?
Well, start with the sprinklers. That gets people in the house a little extra time to discover the fire and get out before they can. Because a house starts to collapse in 7 or 8 minutes if there's a fire in the basement. So if it takes a couple minutes for us to get called and a couple, 3-4 minutes for us to get there, we're within a minute or two of the house starting to fall apart. So at least while we're trying to negotiate the small streets and the long dead end, it gives people a chance to get out. So that's what the sprinklers accomplish. The fire hydrants accomplish then putting the fire out and keeping the houses next door from catching fire based on the house in the middle being fully involved by the time we can actually set up. So there are two different things that we need to have happen to make that long cul-de-sac at least mitigated. I can't say it meets the fire code, but at least we mitigated some of the risk we created.
But is it an absolute requirement for both, or is it, does one mitigate the other, or are they totally separate? Okay, thank you.
Sounded like separate uses. Ms. Hoppy again.
Sorry, in relation to fire safety and traffic, in the option where they were wanting to connect 33rd Avenue over to Robb, if there were something in the design where at the corner of Robb and 33rd there was a large enough turnaround there, would that help with the fire safety?
I'm not sure I'm envisioning what you're saying. If there's a turnaround up at 33rd.
At like the top of the street, so you get all the way to the bottom, but if there's something where you can back in and go out, you know, if there is a wider street there at that corner or more space for command cars to be while the trucks are down the street?
I would say that would help. It's still from Robb, a 1,500-foot dead end.
Thank you.
Did you say you still needed so much space? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fitzgerald, do you also have?
I'm reading your email to Meredith, and if I'm reading this correctly, it says, quote, I would concur that a connection with Quail via 33rd Avenue provides a vital link to fire and emergency access to the proposed Mirkwood Estates. And the staff paperwork indicates that you approve of this option with the addition of fire hydrants. Is that correct?
That being the only viable option, and that we have put in some requirements to mitigate that, including fire hydrants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on to Jason Glass. Bruce, thank you very much. Jeffco Public Schools. Is Jason here? Jason left us. Resident Rebecca Hay, followed by David Hay.
My name is Rebecca Hay, Hay. I live at 3280 Route Street. I just wanted to thank you for your time. With regard to the two options, I would just like to publicly state my option, or I'm in favor of any option that does not poke 33rd over to Route. I would also like to restate that the owners on either side of the land where the street could potentially go through We have offered several times to buy that. And I'm sorry, could you repeat what that's called when it's, you would have to vacate the land? There was like a legal term that you referred to earlier.
Can we get help here? Ken?
It's just,
It would be considered by ordinance as a right-of-way vacation ordinance, and it's typically initiated by the adjacent property owners.
so if we were to go through an option that the city approved to connect Quail Hollow and the new Mirkwood Estates, my husband and I would like to, along with the other residents on the other side of that cul-de-sac, buy the property. I feel that one of the options was a little bit misrepresented. It is not our intent to deny connectivity. We just don't want the traffic from all the school going through. So what we would propose is that the city build a sidewalk through there, and that if we can't put in a pocket park, then the residents on either side would be prepared to buy the land, if that would make sense. I know that the city claims to have an interest in that property. Various residents have told us that over the last 23 years, since Route was platted and built out, they've really done nothing with the maintenance. It's only the last couple of years it's mowed about once a year. The rest of the caretaking has fallen to the residents. Because we try to maintain our streetscape, we've taken to hiring it mowed, or if someone has their mower out, we take care of it. I would also like to propose that you consider a park. If you live in that area, often kids go over to Prospect Valley to play, but because of the school hours and the before and after school care, they ask that if you do show up with your kid, because this has happened to my daughter and I, that you not play on the school grounds, because it's confusing to the after school staff to have students on the premises that they're responsible for, and if there are other children. There really is no other park in that area that you can walk to, even on the other side. I think that it could be a nice addition. There's several other parks that I cited in a letter to the city. And I think the nearest residential park probably would be at 38th and Parfait, which is a fair hike. And also there is Discovery Park, which is a very nice park, but if you're in a stroller and you've got your dog with you, you may not want to hike up that hill and cross Kipling and all that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. David Hay, followed by Laurie Marcello.
My name is David Hay, last name Hay. I also live at 3280 Route Street. I would like to express my support for the options that connect Quail Hollow to the future Robb Street and leave only a pedestrian connection to Route Street. I believe, with all due respect to the fire marshal, that even if 33rd were to be connected through, it's still a long haul to get to the end of that street, and I don't see how making a connection makes that any better. So I think having a connection one side or the other, preferably through Quail Hollow, makes the most sense. I also believe that there's at least some access from 32nd where vehicles could be parked if necessary, because there will be a pedestrian connection there that has been stated in the past. I do not like the option 2 that connects through Route Street, because I think it would be much too easy in the future to make 33rd a through street without a whole lot of notice in advance. And I think the length of the cul-de-sac is not without precedent. I know that in previous testimony that it has been pointed out multiple examples throughout the city where there have been long cul-de-sacs, so I won't repeat them here, but I think that this is not any different than many of the other cul-de-sacs that we have in Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Laurie, and then Stefan Arch.
My name is Laurie Marcello. I live at 3241 Route Street. I'm just confused because at the last meeting, it was very established that the turnaround for the fire trucks was sufficient and it had all been approved, and I'm just so confused that it's changed now. So I guess that's how I'm opening this, because that definitely changed from the last meeting, which apparently the city engineer had said that it had all been approved. So I'm confused on that. As far as the length of the cul-de-sac, it's about the same length as our cul-de-sac. We've had 2 fire trucks, 6 police cars, and 2 ambulances on several occasions down our cul-de-sac, and they made it work. So that happened at least twice, because there was some incident at the end of the street. Also, you know, there's actually 2 or 3 cul-de-sacs in Wheat Ridge that are over a half a mile long. My husband had a map last time he was here. Unfortunately, he's out of town on business. But I don't understand why this is being singled out for this poor developer. You know, there's all sorts of other cul-de-sacs that are less accessible than this one is, or dead ends, and it seems like he's being singled out for some reason, and I guess I'm having a hard time with that too. Access off of 33rd and Quail Hollow is close to us. Selectively choosing to deny this is kind of wrong for this builder. He's really struggled on this. And this isn't anything in the speech that I've just written. It's just what I've been listening to for the last few minutes. So I guess as a neighbor, I kind of feel ambushed that this was different than how I thought it would be when we would get here. My husband is out of town, and he asked me to read a letter on his behalf, if that's okay. He is he would never tell you this, but he's vice president, and he's been a civil engineer for 35 years at his company. He's a professional engineer. Do you mind if I read his letter? Is that okay?
Council?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Dear Mayor Jay and members of the City Council, my name is Anthony Marcello. I reside at 3241 Route Street and have lived there since my wife and I built our home in 1990. Unfortunately, I cannot be there in person to deliver this message as I'm out of town on business. I've spent a great deal of time preparing for and addressing the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission and City Council during past meetings relating to the Mirkwood subdivision. Reading through the packet, it seems like a lot of our concerns have been addressed, especially, you know, property value losses. Crime goes up as soon as you put a through street because the people have a place to escape, and it's just not safe for the kids. It appears that there's 2 motions. One is to approve the variance, and one is to deny the variance. And as a Route Street resident, I have concerns regarding the Route Street connection. I would prefer to see the Mirkwood subdivision connect to 33rd with access through Quail Hollow, which is option 1. Pending approval of the cul-de-sac variance, this would make the most sense. This is further supported by the independent studies completed by Altitude Land Consultants that the builder hired. The first, dated on July 10th, titled Variance Criteria Responses, it's in your packet, supported the Robb cul-de-sac connection to 33rd and Quail Hollow as the most desirable way to access the property where the Mirkwood subdivision is proposed. The second document, dated July 13th, talks about all the drainage and water situations and all that. And basically, it's the proposed Robb Street would be completely submerged in a major storm water event either way. So this is my husband reading all this stuff. It says, though, that the Route Street connection presents more complications than the 33rd Ave connection. Also, as stated in tonight's packet, it actually says that connecting to Quail Hollow is the shortest route for the nearest fire station. And like I said, it had been approved for the builder. The residents of Route Street met with Mr. Mirkwood, and there was 4 alternatives. We really preferred A and B, and that's not even an option put up for us. And again, we're for the park. We're for being close to our neighbors and everything. We're a really close neighborhood. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like something's trying to be taken away from us. We'd like to see this matter closed, so we would love for you guys to go with the variance and pick option 1 would be our preferred options. And we really appreciate all of you listening.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Stephen Archer is followed by Dr. Gil, I'm not quite sure about Chameleon, on 33rd Avenue. Doctor, if you'd be ready.
Hello, Stephen Archer, A-R-C-H-E-R. I live at 3260 Route Street. And, I'm in agreement with my neighbors as they spoke. We'd all prefer option A if we could with the pocket park. And if option A is not on the table, so it speaks, option 1, where it connects to the Quail Hollow side and comes through would be the preference. So, thank you.
Thank you. That was brief. Doctor, yes, would pronounce your last name for us.
I'm Dr. Gil Schmidtke. I live at 11305 West 33rd Avenue.
Could you spell that last name for our records?
Schmidtke. As you remember, I live on the aneurysm, or the bubble of 33rd Avenue. Yakov Smirnov said it best. What a country. I mean, here we have a young entrepreneur who wants to develop some land. A city who would love to get the taxes from the land. And then again, there are different options here. First of all, 32nd, going right on to 32nd, was not an option because the engineer of the year said, we don't do those non-juxtapositioning streets. Well, they do it hundreds of times, but going forward, I can see his point. Let's not make mistake again. Great. Then what about, just going 33rd Avenue through? That really was in 1983 or 87 or something, that was a thought. Well, then started the route shout. And I applaud the route people for saying, we don't want this. And they organized and said, we're going to dumb this down. We're going to come here and tell you guys how much we hate it. 13 residences. On the other side, where Quail Hollow is, and we were promised this was going to be a private community, there are 30-some houses over there that would be affected. But I see progress. Route's happy. 33rd can be done. I'd like you to be concerned about water. I'd like you to be concerned about the raceway of the bubble that I live in that encourages people to come in there and turn around as fast as their cars can go. But certainly there are compromises that can be done here. I'm concerned about people at the end of his cul-de-sac. Sure. I'm concerned about some increased traffic. But I think it's unfortunately, it's fortunately not my job. It is your job to have to decide on this kind of what's a compromise that makes the most people happy. But you've been very patient, and I've enjoyed watching the American process work out. And I do feel sorry for someone who has taken the risk, done all the work, and gets frustrated by the wheels of progress. But thank you very much for your time. I was a professor in my other life, so I wanted to make a long lecture here, but I couldn't. Thank you very much.
Did a great job of it. Thank you. Okay. Glover. Matt Glover, I believe it is. Please come up, spell your last name and address. Followed by Wayne on Sim Street.
Matt Glover, Glover. We live at 11355 West 33rd Avenue. And I want to make one thing clear when they talk about there was a neighborhood meeting, that was the Route neighborhood. The Quail Hollow wasn't at that meeting, nor were we invited. As you're aware, Quail Hollow is a recently city-approved PUD with 12 home sites, of which 11 are built, one to be built in the future. Currently, there are 7 homes that have been purchased, and until 75% of the homes have been sold, we, the homeowners, don't control the HOA. So you can understand why we're a little late to the party. Nevertheless, as homeowners directly adjacent to the development, I have some observations I'd like to share. 1, there's 37 homes in one lot yet to be built on, and a school serviced by Quail, Pearson, and 33rd Avenue, east of the proposed development. 2, there are 13 homes on Route Street, west of the development. If the development connects to 33rd on the Quail Hollow side, it ignores the safety concerns of all the construction traffic while kids are arriving in the morning and leaving in the afternoon, being picked up or delivered to school. You only need to be there in the morning or afternoon to realize how many children are running around and how much congestion is on the street surrounding the school. Number 4, I share staff's concern on page 6 of the staff report concerning drainage on Robb Street in a heavy downpours, should the development connect to 33rd. Both neighborhoods agree about objecting to a through street. However, the solution appears elusive but apparent to me. Whichever option you choose presents a problem for either neighborhood. And I wish you luck.
You know, I usually don't let people enjoy themselves, but this is just too much. Thank you, Mr. Glover. Wayne, I think it's DeWitt, followed by David Moss. Wayne DeWitt, not here. David Moss. Sim Street.
Good evening. My name is Dave Moss, M-O-S-S. I live at 3221 Route Street. First of all, I'd like to share some thoughts that the neighbor just straight across the street from us wanted to pass along. His name is Doug Fisher. I think it's F-I-S-C-H-E-R. He lives at 3220 Route Street. And early on in the conversations over the last month or month and a half, there was a lot of talk about connectivity between the area to the east, Quail, and those streets over to Route Street. And there was discussion about the fact that it really did not provide any connectivity. There were 2 maps that I'd like to share, and I'm sorry, my printer was kind of on its last leg, and I managed to get 4 copies of each of the maps. And you'll see one map shows the area as it stands today, with Route Street as a standalone cul-de-sac and Quail feeding down to 33rd Avenue. It also shows Sim Street as an even longer cul-de-sac than Route Street. The second map, if you can kind of share, hopefully, take a look and pass it on. The second map shows that shows the connection from Route Street going over to the Mirkwood development, and which would presumably be the 33rd Avenue connection. It also shows Sim Street being connected all the way. It cuts off at the top of the map, but it indicates that Sim Street would connect to 38th. That's true connectivity, is having another street that connects 32nd to 38th Street. Having Route Street connect Quail Street really does nothing for connectivity. The other issue, and that's Doug Fisher's comments. The one thing that I'd like to bring up is the fact that, the fire apparatus is going to have to get down, whether it's Route Street or Quail Street, they're going to have to get down either of those streets. The length that they drive down is going to be essentially equal, and the length they drive back up to the south to get onto Robb Street, again, is going to be equal. Once they lay down 5-inch hose and get their fire trucks up inside and then connect off the fire trucks to undoubtedly 3-inch hose, they're going to have that hose out into Robb Street regardless of whether they have access from Route Street or from 33rd. via Quail. So I don't see that being a valid argument to have a connection between Route Street and 33rd Avenue. And I believe that's all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, 'cause he called himself something else. Ross Fawcett on Route Street, followed by Jeff Nelson.
Ross Fawcett, 3240 Route Street, FAWCETT. I just asked the council to approve the variance and to go with option 1 and to seriously consider the option with the pocket park in there also, to build a community between all 3 neighborhoods.
Thank you, Russ. Jeff Nelson, or Nielsen, and then Laurie Strand.
Jeff Nielsen, Nielsen, 3281 Route Street, and I want to express my support for option number 1 and also expand a little bit about what Dave Moss said regarding the fire department's concern. If 33rd Street was to go through, that would only help access to lots 6 and 7. They still have to go up the dead end over 150 feet to lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that's going to be an issue either way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Laurie.
Hello, I'm Laurie Strand. I live at 3445 Quail Court in the Quail Hollow subdivision. I'd like to echo my neighbor, the fine doctor. I think a lot of progress has been made, and I'm excited about some of the options that are presented. I also want to reiterate what my neighbor, Mr. Glover, said, and that is that Quail Hollow subdivision has not been involved in the neighborhood discussions. So previously, 5 of the 7 occupied residents of the Quail Hollow subdivision expressed differing concerns. I mean, we all have different kind of feelings about the neighborhood, and we weren't reached out or included in those neighborhood communications. So I would ask that however we move forward, that if there are additional neighborhood meetings that aren't necessarily with the city, that we be included for a number of reasons. And I just wanted to kind of ask some questions that maybe could be answered after public hearings closed or public comments closed, and I'll just read them off. I'd like some explanation from the applicant on why he prefers option 1. I'd also like the staff to kind of give some sort of explanation for the pros and cons between the 2 different options. There's limited discussion in the staff report, so just wanted to kind of figure out what the pros and cons are on both sides. A big one is the drainage impacts. You know, there is talk that there would be flooding in a major event, but in a, you know, your more run-of-the-mill 10-year storm, what are going to be the impacts under the 2 options? Are they the same? Are they different? Just some more conversation. On the fire district expressed a preference for option 1. Same thing, what are the fire district's thoughts on option 2? Are they nominal differences? Are there substantial differences? Just was hoping we can kind of think through that a little bit more. And in that regard, would additional mitigation be required for option 2, or is it just a matter of scale? I think there's about a 200-foot difference in the variance request, so just wondering what the magnitude of those differences are. And last, I'm very enticed by this idea of a pocket park. Hadn't heard about it, but I like the comment made by the neighbor who just spoke that said it provides an opportunity to build a community between all 3 neighborhoods. So that sounds very exciting to me, and I'd love to hear more, and at the very least have council consider that. So those are the questions I've had. I'd like to just kind of, like I say, have some more conversation about the 2 different options rather than just it be a vote of the people. We're outnumbered, but I'm pleased with where we are now regardless. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Council, that's all I have signed up. I don't know if someone else wants to speak. The developer would like to speak again.
My name is Steve Merker. I'm the developer. Just wanted to respond to a couple of comments that were made. I I don't know if I should be flattered or frustrated that Mr. Kroll has made an appearance on my behalf. He works on the most important deals in the city, and this is certainly flattering that he shows up to provide his comments on a 7-lot subdivision, the result of which would be sprinklers on 7 of these homes, which is a very tough standard to meet because that cost would just be passed along to the homeowners. It's also not a good precedence to show for the other building communities. It also wasn't needed for the Quail Hollow subdivision. It hasn't been requested of any other subdivision. So I'd be opposed to that. But if it is asked of me, I have no choice but to pass that cost on to the future homeowners and then explain them with a letter of explanation to those future homeowners why that request was made of me. To the subdivision length, it's an equal distance, as somebody has pointed out. Doesn't matter whether they have 33rd connection or not. You go down Route Street, you go down Quail Street, it's the exact same length to service that community. So I would ask you to sort of reject, or at least take a moment to consider what the future impacts of asking a developer to put sprinklers in on 7 homes are, especially when there are multiple ways to access these properties. Additionally, these are built to today's standard. The fire mitigation practices in today's building standards and the building materials that we use all take into the most modern technology and fire suppression methods with our building materials, our flooring materials, our wall materials, our roofing materials. All of this stuff is built with fire suppression in mind. So I would ask that you take that consideration very seriously. To the Quail people that feel like that we didn't reach out to them, my apologies. I thought that I had reached out to everybody. I had no intention whatsoever to leave anybody out, and I thought that I was speaking with Mr. Schmitsky several times, and I had tried to reach out through Lori to everybody, and so if those didn't get to you, I apologize sincerely. It was never my intention to exclude anybody from the meeting. The more the merrier, and I was hoping that I would see everybody. So my apologies. As far as the pocket park, if the pocket park really is an option, then one consideration that may be, this is sort of on the fly, would be maybe we can talk about using some of the parkland fees that we use or some of the fees that are collected from this as a way that we develop small improvements, and maybe we can improve and maintain it with either HOA fees. Maybe all 3 neighborhoods can get together and pay for the maintenance of it, because it would benefit the 3 neighborhoods. I would be totally in favor of that. That would be a great option for all of us. So I would ask that if you are going to consider these, I think it would be great if we could approve the variance, that we could approve the subdivision, and if there is a possibility for this pocket park, that we do it in a responsible way, and perhaps we can all share in the cost of the maintenance. I don't see a lot of opposition to that, but I think that there would be a lot of people in favor of a pocket park. And as the applicant, I wouldn't mind doing some sort of improvements that are beneficial to everybody. I would like you guys to continue your vote tonight, because I've been working on this project for almost 2 years now. I've done everything the city has asked. I've done everything I think that the neighborhood has asked. I would like that you vote on this. As somebody brought up, I am an entrepreneur. These things are coming at a substantial cost in time and money to me, and I would like some resolution one way or another. And I want to be here. I'm going to be here for a long time. I live and work in the area, and I have a lot of fight left in me. I want to keep building good stuff, and I don't want this process to continue to slow me down. I want to get this stuff built, and I want to build cool houses for the area. Thank you.
Do you want to wait a moment? I want to see if there's anybody who wants to ask a question of the developer while we have him available, such as does he have an HOA set up or something like that, which I could ask. Do you have an HOA already set up, or is that will be the way this will be?
Once we get the subdivision approved, then we'll be able to set up what those, I don't know what the lots look like yet. So this is what we're hoping gets approved, and then we'll create a homeowners association based on the configurations. And that will be what maintains on a proportionate basis for all of the improvements that are made that are common to the whole subdivision.
Okay. Mr. Fitzgerald, you had a question.
Well, I'll wait till our comments after the motion is made.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a request, and I saw council was sort of nodding their head regarding having our staff discuss pros and cons. Where is council that way? Is that something you'd like to go through? Sounds like it. So our engineer of the year,
Yeah. It's his night, so I'll defer to him. Most of the pros and cons are technical in nature.
thank you.
Would it help if I put the award right here? Does that
It would.
find any additional stuff? Mark Westberg, Public Works staff. There were a couple of things that were mentioned earlier. We can certainly talk about the pros and cons first. So on option one, which is the connection to the east to what's existing as 33rd Avenue, Quail Hollow subdivision, one of the things that was discussed was that there was a pro for that one compared to the other one was it was about 6 feet 100 shorter distance from the beginnings of the north end of Route Street to the nearest fire station at 38th and Parfit, which I assume would be the fire station that would respond to this location. The other location was about 600 feet farther. The one's a little over a mile, the other one's a little under a mile. So there's not a giant difference, but there is about a 600-foot difference. So that sort of tips the scales in favor of going to the east. From a drainage standpoint, what's happening is this street, Robb Street's not being built like a typical street. It's not being built with a crown. It's being built with a single slope to the east. And so what's being built underneath Robb Street is for the minor storm event, which in this case is a 5-year storm event, which is about an inch of rainfall or so. Anything above that's going to flow on the east side of Robb Street. Now, in a 100-year event, all of Robb Street's underwater because there's a couple of hundred acres downstream to the south of 32nd that come across 32nd, that location. So everywhere in between there, you'll have varying levels of water in the street. You know, at a certain level rain event, Robb Street's going to be half underwater, but the other half will still be open. The issue is that if you have the connection to the east, then at some point that's not going to feel safe to cross because the east side of Robb is always going to be deeper than the west side of Robb. So at some point it's not going to feel like it's safe to cross to continue to the east to get on to 33rd. If the connection is made to the west, then you can always stay on that left side. You can drive the way the British do and stay on the left side and be able to, that street will be passable for a longer period of time. So that's just the discussion about the drainage of that. As we were going through design, if the street connected, then it wasn't an issue because there was always that you could always go to the west if you wanted to get out during a larger storm event. The third thing was the school, which was just the distance from the subdivision to the school was the third thing that staff was brainstorming about what the pros and cons might be and what our commentary would be. And certainly if it connects to the east, it's a really short route. It's 800 feet if you were driving your kids there. If the sidewalk connection is made, it doesn't really change for if it goes to the east or west. If people on Route Street want to drive their kids to school, then it's about 2,600 feet to get there. So it's a longer drive for them. We'd hope that everybody walks their kids to school if they live that close, but sometimes that might not be possible. The other comment that was made was about maybe using the church parking lot as an emergency access location for those houses. The church is on the other side of Robb Street, so you don't gain a ton by doing that. I think there's also some grade differentials between the church and Robb Street, and we don't ask fire departments to run up and down hills when they're doing things. The other issue is the church parking lot was probably not built to hold a fire truck. It was built to hold cars, and those fire trucks are, next to trash trucks, are our biggest loading that we design streets for. So the parking lot likely was not built to hold the kind of equipment they'd be responding to these houses with. The other thing that was sort of talked about is often the cul-de-sac length. What happens if the fire truck shows up and they can't get out, and how does the 33rd connection help that? If the fire's on Route Street, having 33rd connect doesn't help that. Or sorry, let me phrase it. If the fire's on Robb Street, at the end of that cul-de-sac or somewhere in the middle, the 33rd connection doesn't help fire get in and out. The issue is if the fire is the second house in on Route Street, now all of Route Street and all of Robb Street can't get out. And if that fire were to jump and get the house, blow to the east, and then get a house on fire on Robb Street, it's going to be very hard for fire to respond to that. The 33rd connection provides a second way to get to Route Street. That's how that connection helps the fire department. Either way, if there's a long cul-de-sac, the issue with a long cul-de-sac is there's a fire at the beginning of the cul-de-sac, not the end of the cul-de-sac. The end of the cul-de-sac, the response is the same regardless of where you go or how long your cul-de-sac is. But if the fire's at the beginning of the cul-de-sac, you've now got that many more people isolated that can't get out because there's a fire at the beginning of the cul-de-sac. I just wanted to clarify that. I think there was some confusion about, what's the issue with having a connected street.
Very helpful. Questions of Mark? Oh, Mr. Matthews.
Do we have any flooding information on what's going on now with that drainage ditch alongside the parking lot on the east side road?
Just anecdotally, right now it's just a big vacant lot out there, and the house is up towards the 32nd Avenue. And what we've heard anecdotally is when it flows, when the water flows and even doesn't overtop 32nd, which it will do at times, it just starts to drain down that little ditch, which has not been very well maintained, and it just literally floods the whole northern half of the Rob Street property, Mr. Merker's property, as it's heading towards Linden Gulch.
Do we know what the grade change is going to be on Rob Street from existing? How much fill is going to go in?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I've not looked at the actual construction drawings for that. I just know that the street slopes to the east, and so their plan is to keep all that water to the east, except during a very large storm, which then it floods the whole street. So a 10-year event, you'd have some level of water in the street, and the pipe is full underneath. You'd still have sort of that passable, left side of the street, the west side of the street would be passable.
Madam Mayor.
Council, do you want to hear from the developer again? Or did you want to ask a question?
With respect to the drainage, all of the drainage has been mitigated by the plans that we're presenting. So we've taken into consideration all the types of drainage that are city standards, and we've met all those standards in the version that we would present to you guys.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Urban wanted to ask a question of
Staff.
of Mark, of Westburg.
Thank you, Mark. As it relates to the sidewalk, if it's installed, who is expected to maintain that sidewalk, or the sidewalk on Route Street?
Yeah, if the connection is made to the east, sidewalk only is installed to the west, then the heavy-duty maintenance of that, the replacing concrete and those kind of things, because it's in a city right-of-way, would be the city. But the city, cannot emphasize enough, I don't think the city would ever go out and remove snow off that sidewalk or do those things. That would be up to the property owners on either side, just like it is for all of us that have sidewalks in front of our houses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council,
Is a motion in order?
the motion is in order.
I move to approve resolution number 22-2017.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, you need to close the public hearing first.
Thank you very much. We got so into that, I didn't get around to that. Thank you. Let me go back here to my system. I'm going to now do that. Public hearing is closed and a motion is in order.
Okay, I still move to approve resolution number 22-2017, a resolution approving a 7-lot subdivision plat for property zone residential 1, R1, at 11435 West 32nd Avenue with a cul-de-sac length variance, case number WS-16-02 and WA-17-07 Mirkwood Estates for the following reasons. City Council has conducted a proper public hearing meeting all public notice requirements as outlined in section 26-109 and 26-407 of the Code of Laws. 2, the proposed lots meet or exceed the R1 zone district regulations. 3, the criteria used to evaluate a variance support approval of the request with the cul-de-sac length variance. 4, all other requirements of the subdivision regulations have been met. 5, utility districts can serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense with the following conditions. The subdivision street access design be in accordance with option 1. The applicant continue working with the staff on final design details prior to plat recordation. Number 3, a subdivision improvement agreement be executed ensuring all public improvements are in place prior to the issuance of building permits for individual lots. 4, the developer pay parks fees at the time of plat recording in the amount of $14,983.74. And 5, the homeowners association covenants be reviewed and approved by staff.
You've made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Hoppy. Discussion. Mr. Matthews.
I'm in favor of option 1, and I'm a little bit reminded of the old saw that goes something like, if everyone comes away from a deal unhappy, it was probably a good compromise. Originally, we started out here with 33rd Avenue going all the way through and being a connector, in which case the Quail Hollow folks would have a lot more traffic, because I do envision there'd be a lot of folks coming from the school and headed out that way when things get congested. I also noted that Route Street and Robb Street would be equal length cul-de-sacs, just in different directions. The only difference I can see there, and I'm looking at page 50 right now in our packet, and Sims is even 1,000 feet long. But Route Street has been existing with a bulb on the end of it as a cul-de-sac. I see no reason why we should apply a different standard to the street right next door. I could see my way clear to vote for an extra fire hydrant if staff or someone down the line through an analysis decides that that would really be beneficial. I would not be in favor of individual sprinklers in the house. The other thing I noticed that I think the drainage problem could probably be solved, and it sounds like we already have done some work in that direction according to what the developer just told us. So I just don't see that we have a real issue there. I think it would be beneficial is the way this shows right now, that at 33rd Avenue there at the connection to the east, I'm assuming that bulb has, I don't know if that bulb exists or not, but if that little half bulb stays in place, for anyone coming out of there that has to turn around, that would give some, at least for medium to small size fire equipment, that would give them some little place there to at least get turned around back into and pull out forwards to get the rest of the way out. But basically, I see no difference in the two streets right now. They're both 600-foot cul-de-sacs. And so I'd be in favor of option one.
Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, I agree with Mr. Matthews in that I feel like option one is the best way to go. I also agree that, and I have a question for staff, if we feel that we would like to ask them to add an additional fire hydrant, is that something we need to put in the motion tonight, or is that something that'll get worked out with the fire department?
As I heard the fire department's testimony, frankly, that's a sort of a design issue that's kind of worked out with all developers. It's not common to have it in the motion. I was thinking about how to handle that, and I think that rather than sort of figuring out how many and where, because we're probably none of us are completely capable of that, you could certainly add a condition number 6, fire hydrants located as required by West Metro. That's probably what happens anyhow. Mm-hmm. So you put it in, then West Metro can work with the developer to decide where, how many, and you're kind of covered there, it would seem.
You know, I agree that the sprinkler system in the residential homes, it comes to a point where it becomes too expensive to build the homes, and then nobody will buy the homes. And so I agree that we shouldn't be forcing this developer to do sprinklers. And also, we voted 18 months ago to remove that out of our codes when we adopted the 2017 code.
It was subsequent to 2012, we realized that there was one section, we had exempted it out in the initial adoption of the 2012 codes except for one section.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we had already exempted those out, and so I would not want to set precedent to do that in our community already with that. And, you know, the Route Street community is already a substantial community. They've been there for a long time, and the Quail Hollow will soon become that. And, you know, hopefully the Merrick Woods Estates will, you know, kind of just come right in line, and they'll have a nice little area there. As far as the Pocket Park goes, I have a question for staff on that too. Is that something, how do we go about that then? We have to work with Parks and Rec for that, or? how do we do
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I think, and Joyce is here in the audience as well, I mean, I think we just haven't gotten into what that would look like in terms of, you know, what that might cost. Typically, if we're going to develop a pocket park or any parkland facility as part of a subdivision, and it's somewhat rare just because we deal with a lot of these smaller infill subdivisions, but the developer would be responsible for all those costs. Now, that's a little awkward here since it's off-site, so I think if council is interested in pursuing that in any way, I think we just have to have some sort of a separate process. I mean, if you want to direct us to do something in that regard, we could, but again, we do have concerns with maintenance. Just, you know, you've got to get crews out there. It's the same kind of mobilization cost as going to any park, except and the same frequency, duration, but there's a lot, it's a lot less efficient use of time as opposed to going to one big park and spending a day there with a crew.
So what would the community's next step be if they wanted to follow through with trying to get a pocket park? What would their next step be then to do that?
Well, before I answer that question, I'd just like to add on, this is a very, very small piece of property. It's not even the size of a lot. So what that looks like as a pocket park is probably a trail running through them. I mean, there just isn't a lot of room on that piece of property. Having said that, I would speak to the developer and see if he would like to acquire that property as part of that subdivision, I guess. And I see it, as Ken suggested, it's very hard to sustain a small property like that. It's not cost effective for the city to make that a pocket park, and we don't generally accept those small parcels. So I would suggest they work that out among themselves if they want to have an HOA that maintains it. And then I think they want to really consider the pros and cons of having a park in your side yard or your front yard, because it's a public park and it will attract it will be open to everyone that wants to visit that park. So those are some of the things I'd consider, but that would be the next step. Speak to the developer, acquire the property, and figure out if they can have an HOA to maintain it. This would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
So that would pretty much be out of the range of this resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could just add logistically, I mean, there's a couple other considerations. You know, I don't know yet whether there's a need for any utility looping through that, because it's a public right-of-way, which typically would have utility services. To the comment made earlier about water pressure, I don't know whether that's one option for how you loop water lines through there. Again, it's dedicated right-of-way right now, so the first step in any process moving forward would be to decide whether we want to vacate the right-of-way. We could develop a park, I suppose, in a right-of-way, but if we vacate the right-of-way, by state statute, it vacates to the two adjacent property owners. So it's just kind of complicated, because if we vacate the right-of-way, if council determines that that's what you think the best policy option is moving forward, that's fine, but then it's in private property, and those two property owners, unless they dedicate it back to the city or something like that, it's just logistically, it's not an easy thing to really figure out, unfortunately.
And it seems, and it's your discussion, but it seems for that reason, it is a separate process, and it's not a process you can kind of hang on to or insert into the subdivision plus variance approval process, which you have. It is separate, and it would mean that the people that would want that property vacated would be the adjacent property owners. There's vacation, it goes to them, then they decide to combine that, work with the developer, and then perhaps approach the city with a package. But that, as you can appreciate, that's all something that can and should, in fact, happen separately if it's going to happen from the subdivision approval.
Great, thanks. And then my last comment is just that, yes, there was some comments about the construction traffic, and my daughter actually goes to Prospect Valley, so I'm there every day. And while Quail Hollow was being built, we had, a lot of traffic through there with construction, concrete trucks and whatnot. And it just takes patience, because that's what happens when you're developing areas around there. And so either way, the construction would be going down one of the two streets. So I'm supportive of the option one, and I appreciate everybody's time and your rally to come in here and support your community. Thanks.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah. Mr. Urban.
Thank you. As it relates to the property and specifically not necessarily the discussion around vacating the right-of-way, but the sidewalk from the Route Street cul-de-sac, my concern is that as we look at this, because the city has, as it relates to the comments from the neighbors, that the city hasn't necessarily maintained that property heretofore, And going forward, as that sidewalk is installed, and the city is not going to be necessarily maintaining the removal of snow and what have you, it's more incumbent on the neighbors to do that. And so we're looking at sort of a no man's land, so to speak. And so my concern as it relates to the property is, what's going to happen? Is it incumbent on the neighbors to file for a vacation of the right-of-way right up to that sidewalk, or does that vacation of the right-of-way then make that sidewalk through that property become sort of that a dividing line between the two neighboring properties, or how does that vacation, let's say a vacation request came in from the neighbors and said, we want this right-of-way to be removed, then does that property then get divided amongst those two neighbors, or how does that shake out?
You want to start it?
The vacation statute says that when you vacate a street right-of-way, the adjacent property owners take to the midpoint of the right-of-way. So that's just, the law. It's very common when the city vacates streets to reserve easements for all sorts of things, underground utilities, et cetera. So I would suggest that if there were a sidewalk there, the city would reserve, if it were to vacate, reserve a right for a pedestrian sidewalk to be in that location or some other location. That's really common, easy to do, a common feature of vacation.
Okay, so there'd be like a 10-foot easement or whatever that might be.
Whatever the city felt it needed to reserve, it would be an easement. And the fee title, of course, would have passed, but it'd be an
But
easement.
that's totally separate from this process, and it would
That's
be
correct.
incumbent on the adjacent property owners to bring that request forward in a separate process from this.
That's
But
correct.
as it relates to what's being presented here, is that there would be a sidewalk installed, that cost is incurred by the developer and
Correct.
is a part of this subdivision plat.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Duran?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to thank the developer and the citizens for joining together, actually working and listening to what the community wanted. I will support option number 1. I think that's a really good way to go. Also, I think the fire department, West Metro, mentioned that it would be required to have another hydrant there, correct?
If we put that,
Okay. Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to clarify. So thank you. Thank you all so much.
I understand that the fire hydrant, as required by West Metro, would be a part of the motion.
If the maker of the motion and the second agree with that, yes. Otherwise, you run it as an amendment.
Yeah, the
That's what I'm
maker of the
thinking.
motion does not agree with that.
Okay.
Right, so we would have to run it as an amendment.
Sure.
And it would
Somebody
be
wants to,
amendable,
it's
whether-
up to you, but you could say fire hydrants located as required by West Metro, and that would be someone's amendment.
Someone's amendment, I understand.
The motion does allow the staff to work this out, I believe, right?
Oh,
On
automatic,
design details prior to plat recordation, it might fit in there.
all right.
And as I think was mentioned earlier, that West Metro commonly works with our developers, whether or not you've got a subdivision plat condition. That's what I heard.
All right, so we're comfortable with it then. Ms. Davis wanted to say something before.
So
you vote.
I'm going to just be quick. I do, I will support option number 1, and I thank everyone for being part of it. I also heard a couple things from the developer that I want to make sure, and I know that he committed to, so thank you. Things that he's been working on is to make sure about the drainage, and that's all part of it, so thank you. And also to include the Quail Group, and I appreciate that, and they appreciate that as well. But I do think it's a good compromise, and we'll support it.
Anyone else? Mr. Fitzgerald?
I'd just like to echo what others have said here. I know this has been a very arduous 2-year process, and I thank Mr. Merker for hanging in there. And it's been a wonderful exercise in democracy to see, especially the Route Street residents involved in this. I know you've been to at least 3 official city meetings, and I think some of you have been up here for other things. And it shows that although this may be an arduous, long process, in the end, everybody got a semblance of what they wanted. So I think this is an excellent example of democracy in action and civility at work.
Miss Wooden.
I guess I'm the last one. I will be voting against this tonight, and the reason is that I support the original connectivity for 33rd Avenue. I believe the staff did meet the requirements that were needed for this, and I do recall, this is my last year on council, and I do recall the developer of Quail Hollow coming in and wanting his plat approved, and the neighbors around coming in and vehemently arguing against it. And the comments were, you're going to take away our sunsets, you're going to take away our park, you're going to take away our land. And again, it was private land that was up for sale for someone to develop. And this tract of land is also private land that was up for sale for someone to step forward and develop. And for many, many years, it was not developed. The market didn't support it. And I think it's a reflection of how quickly our city's changing as to these pieces of land that were vacant for years and years, and all of a sudden they're developing really quickly. So I'm going to vote against it because I do believe that the original plan was the best option.
Okay. I believe it's ready, time to cast your votes.
The vote is 6 in favor, 1 against.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 3. Councilmember Davis.
2? Item number 2?
Oh,
Yeah.
2, we had to go with Fitzgerald. Thank you all for coming. Please be a little quiet as you leave so that we can go forward. Mr. Fitzgerald again.
Okay, this is an ordinance on first reading. Council Bill 15-2017, an ordinance approving a permanent easement to Equinox Properties, LLC, for the purpose of constructing a stormwater structure on city-owned property. Issue: Equinox Properties, LLC is expanding and conducting improvements to the Circle K located at 3805 Kipling Street. As part of these improvements, a new stormwater drainage structure is required. The structure is located in Lena Gulch on city-owned property just south of the Recreation Center at 4005 Kipling Street.
This is first reading, so I believe that we can go ahead.
Is a motion in order?
Yes, please.
I move to approve Council Bill 15-2017, an ordinance approving a permanent easement to Equinox Properties LLC for the purpose of constructing a stormwater structure on city-owned property. Order it published. Public hearing set for Monday, August 14th at 7 p.m. in City Council chambers, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Davis. Please go ahead and cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Now we can move on to item number 3. Ms. Davis.
A motion to accept the 2016 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report from Swanhorst and Company, LLC. Section 10.15 of the Municipal Charter for the City of Wheat Ridge requires that an independent audit be performed annually for the city. The CPA firm Swanhorst and Company performed the audit for the city's financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2016. A representative will be at the July 24th City Council meeting to present this information. I will, because I'm sure he's going to go over some of the things that he went over, but I do want to go over a couple of the issues that were identified. One is investments. As mentioned in the past years, the city has purchased certificates of deposit at banks not certified under Public Deposit Protection Act, a requirement of state statutes. However, it is our understanding that similar certificates of deposit are no longer being purchased. We recommend the city monitor compliance with the applicable laws and policies when purchasing the investments. The other item that is on here is federal awards. The city continues to maintain accounting records for federal awards using manual spreadsheets prepared by grant administrators and accounting personnel. We continue to recommend that the city utilize the established accounting systems and centralize the grant accounting process. This will help identify correct errors through the internal controls in place. And probably nearer and dearer to my heart, compensated absences. The city's liability for unused employee vacation time has a balance of $1,143,126 as of December 31st. Because this represents a significant liability to the city, we recommend the city evaluate the policies in place to determine the cost is appropriate to achieve goals for the city. I think basically more of that means we will try to work that our employees have a work-life balance and take their time off rather than accrue it. I think that's what that is. So do you want a motion before we have the report, or would you like the report first?
We would really want the report first.
Okay. The report first?
You asked if the motion,
Which would you prefer?
we would need to have the report.
Okay. So it sounds like they want the report before my motion.
So thank you, Council. My name is Tim Dronkers. I'm the accounting manager for the city.
Your name again?
Tim Dronkers.
Tim, thank you.
D-R-O-N-K-E-R-S. I'd just like to introduce Wendy Swanhorse of Swanhorse and Company
Thank
to
you.
present the 2016 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Good evening. Wendy Swanhorse with Swanhorse and Company, and we performed the 2016 audit for the city. And I think you guys got a couple documents electronically, and maybe you got the hard copies tonight. But just so you know, this is a document that has the numbers that come from your accounting system. And then you guys, as the council, hire us to tell you that we think these numbers are fairly stated. So within this document, you'll see our opinion that tells you that we think that they are. And then the second document you got, we call this our management letter. This is our communication to you. And what this says is what we do during the audit process and what we found. So again, our goal when we come here really is just to tell you that these numbers are fairly stated. And then under the auditing standards, our other responsibility is if we identify any weaknesses in your controls that could simply cause these numbers to be misstated or allow for fraud, that's what we're required to tell you in this letter. And the good news for you is that we did not identify anything we think rises to that significant level. So we do have a few comments in here, and I think you talked about a few of those. And I will say that those have been comments in your management letter for a few years. And it seems like from our perspective is that those aren't things that can be fixed overnight. And I know the city's been working on those. For example, you mentioned those certificates of deposit, and those were purchased several years ago. And so, you know, the city doesn't want to take a loss or incur a penalty by getting rid of those. They're just gradually getting rid of those and not buying new ones. So it probably will take a little bit of time to fix all of those things, but I know the city is aware of those and they are working on those. And we talked about those during the audit process. So all in all, your accounting records are in good shape. No significant financial issues from our perspective. So I think the audit went really well.
Thank you, Wendy. Do we have questions of Ms. Swanhurst?
Madam Mayor.
Oh, Mr. DiTullio?
Thank you. I just wanted to mention on the investments, since I've taken office, we're not buying any CDs, which are FDIC approved. They're all PDPA, Public Deposit Protection Act. That's what CSAFE and some of the banks that are larger banks like First Bank. So as those mature, those monies are going into a PDPA account or our checking account with First Bank to pay bills. But we will not be buying any FDIC type instruments in the next foreseeable future. And I think most of them are going to be maturing within the next 2 or 3 years. Some of them are 5-year CDs that should be maturing here within the next 3 years or less.
Thank you. I believe that, Mr. Urban?
Thank you. As it relates to the misstatements related to the Urban Renewal Authority, why was that presented as a potential weakness in the financial reporting process, or how do we how do we see that as a potential weakness, or what was that related to?
That would relate to, when we come to do the audit work, if we identify things that aren't recorded quite correctly, and we propose adjustments to make sure these numbers are fairly stated, that's really what that relates to. We made some adjustments, mostly related to the Urban Renewal Authority, but all in all, your accounting records really are in pretty good shape, and we don't make a lot of adjustments. When things come up that are a little bit unusual, I think that's what creates some of those adjustments that we make to the numbers.
But
I have every confidence that your finance department can do the reporting that they're required to.
okay, thank you.
I believe we're ready for the motion now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to accept the 2016 Comprehensive Annual Financial Financial Report from Swanhorst and Company LLC. I would like to add in that motion a request that staff bring to a study session, just an update as far as what are some action plans that might be taking place around the 3 items that were listed under the issues, which would be investments, federal awards, and compensated absences, on what might be some action plans around how we are taking care of that.
Second. Seconded, was that Ms. Duran? Yep. If there's no further discussion, please cast
I
your
have a
votes.
discussion point.
Go ahead.
This is in no way in any sort of value judgment with respect to the auditing that was conducted, and I really appreciate all the effort that was done. My question is in respect to our ability just to kind of keep it on a rotating basis with different auditing firms, and I'm curious as to how long we've been with this particular firm, and whether or not we have any policies in place relative to using different firms over time, or whether or not we have any kind of desire or interest in using different firms to make sure that we have a kind of a different eye looking at things from time to time. And again, this is not to suggest anything, and I'm sure you're well aware of this. This is just standard practice in the industry, but I wanted to ask, how long have we been with this particular firm? And is this a policy that we have in place, or?
I believe, Wendy, and you can jump in here, the relationship with the city has been about 15 years or so. Does that sound right? Yeah.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
On an annual basis, Councilmember Urban staff takes a step back and looks at how the auditing process went in terms of evaluating the performance of the audit team. One of the things that Swanhorst and Company brings to the table that other audit firms may not necessarily do is they rotate auditors.
Okay.
So we don't have the same auditors on an annual basis. They rotate. We may have one staff member from their audit team that's was on the audit for the previous year. So we do have that rotation, which is a best practice within the audit field. Certainly, we have never had any significant issues that has caused staff concern to question whether or not we need to go out and issue an RFP.
Good.
So, that practice with Swanhorst has worked for the city thus far.
And that's where I'm wanting to make sure of, is that we don't have, if we have the same person looking at our books every year, and every year they say it's great, it's like the same mechanic looking at your car every year, and they say it looks great. I want to make sure that we have a different set of eyes looking at our books from year to year, to make sure that we have a fresh pair of eyes looking at things, to make sure that we're not missing something that we otherwise would have. So that's my intent in asking that. And again, it's nothing about, I think you guys are doing a great job. I just want to make sure that we're doing our best to make sure that we have fresh eyes looking at this from time to time. So that's my question on that. So thank you.
Okay, I want to thank Mr. Tim Dronkers, our accounting manager. Obviously, you've done a great job. Ready for the vote?
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, let's move on to item number 4. Ms. Wooden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is resolution number 26-2017, authorizing city officials to execute an intergovernmental agreement by and between the County of Jefferson, State of Colorado, and the City of Wheat Ridge regarding the administration of respective duties concerning the conduct of the coordinated election on November 7, 2017. At issue, the City of Wheat Ridge will participate in a coordinated election on November 7, 2017. The attached resolution and intergovernmental agreement, IGA, must be executed and forwarded to Jefferson County by Tuesday, August 29, 2017. The documents refer to the administration of the respective duties of the county and of the City of Wheat Ridge concerning the conduct of the coordinated election. The duties of the county clerk include, but are not limited to, ballot preparation, voter lists, staff selection and training, providing election supplies, counting of the ballots, and certification of results. The duties of the City of Wheat Ridge include, but are not limited to, call and notice ballot preparation. The city clerk shall act as the City of Wheat Ridge's election officer and the designated election official. She shall act as the primary liaison between the City of Wheat Ridge and the contact officer for the county clerk and recorder.
Thank you. I don't know that we need a staff report on this. I believe we can, nope.
I move to approve Resolution 26-2017, authorizing city officials to execute an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Jefferson, State of Colorado, and the City of Wheat Ridge regarding the administration of the respective duties concerning the conduct of the coordinated election to be held on November 7th, 2017.
May I have a second on that?
Second.
Mr. Fitzgerald gave us a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our business meeting. Let me check that here. And it does. So I'm going to close the public meeting. And yes. City managers matters. They're looking at me like, that's you. You are the CM.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder to council and the public, we don't have a meeting next Monday evening. It's the 5th Monday, so we have a Monday off. But you're all surprised by that, aren't you?
Yeah. We would have been sitting all around here.
But there is, I just want to remind everybody too, if you haven't heard, National Night Out is August 1st, next Tuesday evening here in front of City Hall in Hayward Park. Starts at 5 p.m. So everybody's invited to that. Our police department will be present to meet and greet residents and provide safety tips and have other conversations with our residents. So please feel free to stop by with that. Mr. Tulio is going to give an update on our roofing permit revenues, but we are, as I say every week, still very busy. We've had 3,900 residential roofing permit applications submitted. We've processed nearly 3,200. Again, compared to last year, for the whole year of last year, we processed 1,597 permits. So we have 4 contract permit technicians on board. We are having a second interview with a second internal permit technician for city employees, so hopefully we'll have that filled also. And thankfully our contract firm, Charles Abbott, is continuing to keep up with the number of contract inspectors that we need to meet our next day inspections. So still very busy out there. We're meeting, I think we're issuing permits within a 5 to 7 day period right now. Hopefully when we get this additional permit tech on, hopefully we'll get that down to maybe 4 to 6 days. So Mr. DiTullio, you have some additional updates?
Thanks, Patrick. Before the meeting, I passed out the roofing permits and inspections reports, a biweekly report. This is the July 24th. And I highlighted some of the information that was for 2017 year to date. As Patrick mentioned, we've processed 3,258 roofing permits. We don't know what that percentage is of all the city, but revenue has been $1,427,588.03. And then right below that graphic is information about applications submitted, which is around 3,900. And we showed the data both in a chart and in a bar chart for easier understanding. So that's where our revenue is. And I could say that this revenue has helped offset the revenue loss from the Walmart leaving 38th and Youngfield. I can't give the actual dollar amounts out, but this has backfilled a lot of that revenue for this year only. And on the back of the page, at page 2, we have the costs of contract labor. And if you look down at the bottom, I've highlighted in yellow some of the costs, but to make a long story short, the city has so far spent $166,340 on the contract labor, and that includes the permit technicians that are contractors and also the inspectors. And so it's short anecdote. I was walking home from a car shop on 38th Avenue, and I was walking by a city inspector with a roof, and it was a mid-roof inspection, and I heard what was happening. And so at the mid-roof inspection, the contractor hadn't used enough nails on the shingles, so they caught that at the mid-roof, and the contractor was told by the inspector that instead of four nails per sheet, you have to have 6. So while the mid-roof inspection may be controversial, I think it does help with product and with performance. And so that was completely off the cuff. I was just walking down High Court, and I heard this conversation going on. I think it was our CBO was actually talking to the contractor. So while some people do complain about the mid-roof inspection, I think if the contractor and the property owner plan that right, it can be done quickly the same day as they're working on the roof. And I was appreciative that they caught that while they were doing the mid-roof. So
Thank you for that. We do hear some occasional comments about the mid-roof. Okay, that was Mr. DiTullio.
any questions or comments on that report? This will be on the website tomorrow and on Facebook and social media, probably tomorrow also. Thank you.
Is that all of your reports as a treasurer?
Yes.
Okay. City Attorney's matters.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Robin, as the deputy clerk, did you want to say anything?
The city clerk and the election commission would be willing to field questions from the community for the mayor and city council candidate forum, and would be interested in hosting and emceeing the candidate forum. The final questions to be determined by the election commission and Heather Geyer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go down the council row here. Ms. Duran, she goes, oh, me first, I know it. I can feel it coming.
Hey, that's okay. What I was going to ask is, we had a lot of citizen comments in the beginning regarding a discussion on bulk planes, so I would like to add that to a study session to hear more from the citizens as to what they have in mind, what they're thinking, and I'd like to add it to a future study session.
I'd support that.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight to talk about their community, whether it's through bulk plane or through cul-de-sacs becoming through streets. And I also just kind of wanted to mention, it kind of sparked in me when Mr. DiTullio was talking about the mid-roof inspection. The mid-roof inspection process did go to our building code advisory board. I feel like it was about 2 years ago. And that board of experts looked at it and decided that it should stay. And I do understand that there are some grumblings out there about it. But one thing to keep in mind is that while you may hire a general contractor who may be Colorado-based, they may be subcontracting to an out-of-state subcontractor. And if you have a 30-year shingle and it's not put on correctly, it won't last 30 years. And your warranty will be null and void if it's not done right. So in reality, our mid-roof inspection, while it can be a hassle for the contractors, it truly is something that's keeping our community in a safer place of having proper roofs put on. So.
Thank you for that. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of the passing of Chester Bennington, I wanted to provide the telephone number for the Colorado Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's 493-8255. I also wanted to alert everybody to an event this coming week on July 26th at 6 p.m. at Brewery Riccoli. They are doing a tapping of their Oats McGoats beer, which is a national collaboration with Samuel Adams. So that's something of a unique experience for Brewery Riccoli. And then the Colorado Human Trafficking Council is meeting on July 28th at 9 a.m. The Jefferson County Human Services Building. And the Opioid and Other Substance Abuse Disorder Subcommittee is meeting on August 1st down at the State Capitol starting at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Nothing.
Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Matthews?
Thank you, not tonight.
Okay. This Coffee with the Mayor will be Saturday, August 5th. It's always the first Saturday of the month. It's always at 9 o'clock and at Vanola's. Hope that some of you will come. I always enjoy several people coming out and visiting with me. Policy and Policies is this Wednesday, I think. It's this Wednesday, and it'll be at the pizza place, My Pie, right? And I'm not sure, I think it's at 7 o'clock, usually 7. Infinitus Pie, no longer My Pie. Otherwise known as My Pie or somebody else's pie or whatever. And that's it. Now I will close the official meeting, even though so I've closed it again. Thank you all and good night. Oh, we're going to have a study session and we're going to have a slight break beforehand. Right. I think it's 7.
memo.
Let's open the
sorry.
study session. Ta-da.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, good.
All right, Ms. Geyer.
Ready? I should speak now? Okay. Sarah handed out a memo. Included in your packet was just a brief cover memo indicating that council had requested the special study session this evening to discuss the 2017 election forum. For your review this evening, we have a more detailed memorandum in front of you, which provides some of the background that I provided last week. So for those of you who couldn't make that study session, there's that background. I'm happy to go into that background if you'd like me to. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and move forward with discussing the options that staff has laid out for council's consideration this evening. Would anyone like?
Background, or can we go to the options?
Okay, so option one that's outlined here deals with multiple host applications this year. We currently don't have a joint application from Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge or from the Wheat Ridge Chamber. I do know that there has been some interest by the League of Women Voters, by citizens, for that matter, to ask the League of Women Voters to put in an application to host the forum. So a couple of things, direction-wise, we could accept the first filed application as the host unless the applicant is otherwise unable or ineligible to serve as the forum host, which would be the Wheat Ridge Chamber. We could accept applications until a specified date, so and then randomly select one of the eligible applicants. So that would mean that staff would post that we're soliciting applications on the website, on Facebook, and then do a set date in August, probably mid-August, given the time considerations we're up against. And then accept all eligible applicants as co-hosts, which is really the manner in which Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge and Wheat Ridge Chamber have been moving forward up to this point in time. And then require the co-host to coordinate their efforts in a mutually acceptable way. Item 2 that we've outlined here is to address multiple host applications permanently. This involves the potential for competing forum host, and this year may just be an anomaly in that matter. If you reference the background that I provided at the first beginning of the memorandum, you'll see that we haven't necessarily been in this situation where we've had multiple organizations express a desire to host the forum. However, council reserves the right to permanently amend the guideline to address this scenario in the future. So what that might look like would be that the city televises one election forum per election cycle. Excuse me, it's getting late, so apologize if I fumble over words. And really, this is a best practice with most of the municipalities. If you look at the attachment included with this memorandum, it's not common for cities to televise more than one election forum. More than one election forum may take place in a community, but not necessarily televised. No additional election forums would be televised on Channel 8. Additional election forums may be televised on Channel 8 as to the logistics of the city videographer and that sort of thing. The cost would be $425. So again, the city budgets for one election forum per year within the Channel 8 programming budget. The third option that we've outlined for council is to designate a neutral third party such as League of Women Voters to host the forum this year and or in future years. If you reference the attachment, it appears that several organizations have moved in this direction where they ask League of Women Voters to come in and host the election forums and provide the moderation and so forth. A fourth option, which is really done can be done in conjunction with either of the three options outlined earlier, is to provide amendments, provide additional moderator guidelines. So if you reference the administrative guideline included with your packet, and I believe I I acknowledged this last week in study session. We don't have specific guidelines as it relates to what moderation looks like. So we have several bullets here. I won't read these one by one, but happy to answer any questions. This is something that staff would recommend moving forward with and incorporating in the administrative guideline regardless. So in brief summary, we're recommending that council consider moving forward with option 3 for this year. And if you want to consider that for future years, we can certainly do so with the addition of the moderator guidelines included on page 3.
So we have 3 options, 4 with the guidelines sort of added to the item. Option
Yes.
Number 3, is that kind of what? Yep, microphone. We have 3 options with guidelines added by option number 4, or which is sort of an option. All right, council, we got arms coming up here. Who's first? Who's on first here? Ms. Davis.
So thank you for pulling this together, because I know you had like a week. So thank you for doing that. I want to say that I would support the recommendation of number 3 to have a neutral party provide the forum this year. And I think we have, one thing about the League of Women Voters, we have had them represent us in some special issue kind of forums, so it's not out of the realm to have them participate in this, because they have participated in other city forums. I definitely understand how other groups want to be involved in it, and thank them for the involvement. I think that ways to even provide information on the candidates, I think there's still availability for that. For instance, I know being a candidate a couple of years in a row, there's always been like some questionnaires that like the Gazette's given, or, some of the papers that you've entered those things in and you've answered their questions and they've published it. So I could see if some of these other groups, if it be the chamber or some of those folks, could always have those questions out to the candidates. Candidates could always answer those questions and they could post it on their website. Because I appreciate these groups wanting to do more to get the information out, but I do think that a neutral third party is a good option. I also think having no elected officials as a part of the process is good too, just to keep it, just as a third party. My other recommendation would be along the lines of looking at something like Golden had done. I think that we have really started some community outreach and getting folks involved. So it would be nice if we had some kind of election forum commission, or we call it what you'd like, and maybe appoint some folks. I know that we recently appointed some folks when it came to election processes, when we had to have a re-election. I don't know if we can put that as a part of a charter or ordinance or those types of things, but I would, because time is of the essence this year, I would support doing something in the following year to kind of mirror what we've done with our DIRT task force and some of those other groups that we've gotten folks involved, and it's kind of a group of citizens in the future to possibly help conduct these forums.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
I like option 3, and I respect what Councilwoman Davis has just said. I would like to approach this, though, from a different angle. I'm looking at the Channel 8, Channel 22 policies and the rules. And in the rules, there are several places where sponsors are mentioned. And I believe that the word sponsors relates to the history of how that took place in the city. But this basically is a city function. And if we consider the League of Women Voters, for example, as moderators rather than sponsors, I agree with option 3 as it relates to moderators, but I would like to remove all references to sponsors in the Channel 8 and Channel 22 rules. I think it's a city function.
Okay.
So if I understand you, Tim, just to clarify, your recommendation is for the League of Women Voters not to sponsor or host the forum, but to moderate, to serve as moderators for the forum?
I don't know. I want the concept that we've operated under in the past to disappear. That is to say, I don't want to have a community group be a sponsor that has some control over how the process unfolds. So I believe these rules were made at a time when we had community sponsors. All I want to do is remove that historical artifact from the rules. I'm making myself clear.
Well, I think the fear was you don't want them limited to moderating. You want them to handle it in total. Is that what you're saying or not?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
We can change the language to host. Some cities do it a little bit differently. Lakewood, for example, they pay to have a TV anchor. You see professional listed under that moderator column. They've had Ed Sardella moderate their election forum in past years. So that's always an option as well. That's something we don't have necessarily budgeted for this year, but it's something that we could look at if council prefers to have someone maybe with more name recognition in the community do the moderation, so it wouldn't be someone. Typically, League of Women Voters, they find someone from another community, adjacent community, not necessarily within the same community, to serve as moderator.
Okay, I'm just trying to make a distinction here between two entities, a moderator and a sponsor. As long as there is no distinction between those two, and option 3 takes place, then I'm good.
Does everybody understand what his goal is? I didn't think so. I use the word holy, meaning that they create it, actually they're all the things under the guidelines that are mentioned here.
Yeah, the intent of using the terminology sponsor is just that an organization approaches the city and says, we want to sponsor this election forum, and we're going to take care of all the logistics. We're going to work with your staff. It keeps staff out of being involved in the nuts and bolts. Certainly staff is responsible for reviewing questions, reviewing who the moderator is, date, time, logistics, those sorts of things. So that's the grassroots aspect of it, the way that it's been historically.
But that's exactly what I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah.
I want to, yeah. I don't want somebody from the community organizing this. I want the city to organize this. And we'll find,
League of Women Voters.
well, calling the League of Women Voters up and saying,
Wouldn't you want them to oversee it, the city, but somebody else organize it?
I just don't want a group from the community that has a vested interest to jump in and be the sponsor of something that should be totally nonpartisan, non-judgmental about prospective candidates.
Are you ready? You had a question before, or are we still sort of meditating over this one? Mr. Matthews, did you want?
Yeah.
Someone's got to sit.
Yeah, I was a little concerned. I mean, in item 3, it says designate a neutral third party. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a neutral third party. All organizations seem to have a bent one way or the other. And I certainly would not be in favor of having the same organization do it year after year after year, because I think that's just getting inbred, if you will, for lack of a better term right now. I see no reason why if two groups want to sponsor this, that they can't would be designated to work between themselves and work out the procedure. I don't mind us having a set procedure, but let the two groups themselves come together and work out their compromises as two different groups as far as who's going to be a moderator, as far as actually asking questions. Maybe there's a moderator, co-moderators, one from each group or something. But I hate to limit just to one organization year after year after year doing the forum.
Mr. Rand?
But first, let me make it clear that I have no issue with the League of Women Voters hosting this. I guess my concern is, and confirm for me, Heather, we had two entities, two groups that filled out an application, applied, right, to host this forum.
Well, one entity.
Okay, one entity so far.
Leaders Chamber.
Okay. And I think if we want to set this for next year, that's fine, but I think to change things in midstream right now and say, oh, wait a minute, time out, we've decided we're going to change how we do things, we're going to change the criteria, when they've already applied, I don't think is fair. I mean, if we were having this discussion in January, April even, that's one thing, but we're having this discussion in July, and we have a limited time to get this done. Are we concerned that the chamber cannot be fair, are going to be biased? What are we concerned about here for this year?
I'm not concerned about the chamber in any way, shape, or form. I accept the chamber as the holder of this event. All I am trying to do is divorce ourselves this year and in the future from our historical past. And I'm not expressing this very well, and I understand that, but I just don't want a distinction that the sponsor is one group from the community and the moderator is chosen by that group, and therefore indirectly also writes the questions and decides how it goes. This is essentially a city function. So that's all I'm trying to get at.
Well, I would say if we have two sponsors, co-sponsors of the event, I have no reason to anticipate that they wouldn't be fair. They haven't proven they wouldn't be fair. And if the questions were put together by a clerk and recorder or Survey Monkey, say citizens, put in a bunch of questions they'd like to have the candidates asked, and then say we got those 100 questions and we picked 20 or 30, and those questions are drawn out of a hat. I don't see how there could be an issue with preference or bias or anything like that. I mean, and I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's something that would be great if we want to push this through for next year. But I think for this year, to change that midstream is telling the chamber, well, wait a minute, we're changing everything right now. I think there's a way that we can make sure that everybody's accountable, there isn't any bias, nobody's being discriminated against, and we can do this fairly. That's where I'm coming from for this year.
Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Heather, in where you have amend the guidelines to include moderator guidelines, I don't see anywhere about how the questions are collected, sorted, and then chosen.
Typically, that's up to the sponsoring organization, and the city requests that we review the questions in advance of the forum so we can ensure and voice any concern. If there's any questions that may have a political leaning or come across as biased or whatever the situation may be. So our guideline doesn't go into great detail about that specific process within the overall organization and logistics of the forum. And it's not common for policies, neighboring communities, they don't have policies that go into great detail. It's really, you have general language like what you see in our guideline along with the moderator guidelines. That sets the tone to the host organization or the organizer as to what parameters they have to work within.
Thank you. Is it something we can add to there that the questions will be city staff approved prior to?
Yes.
Okay.
We can make that more explicit.
Thank you. And then, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have any problems with the chamber doing it this year. I feel like it's kind of a first come, first serve. I know that there's kind of a dog pile of people that want to pile onto that and have 100 co-hosts. I feel like the chamber got their application in, and they were the first filed application, and we should allow them to host it this year. And that if we do want to change it, then we do go ahead and designate the League of Women Voters for the years coming. And, in our packet, we have that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 communities that use the League of Women Voters as their hosting organization. The city of Golden uses their Leadership Golden Alumni Association, and the city of Arvada uses the Arvada Chamber. So I think both by using the Wheat Ridge Chamber and the League of Women Voters, we're pretty much in line with what our neighboring communities do. And I feel like at that point, there can be no cry of foul. We accepted the first application that came in. They're perfectly capable of being able to do it, along with the different guidelines that we add for the moderator guidelines, and that the city staff approves the questions prior to it. And then in the future, we designate something for the future and we change the rules for the future. I'm not a big fan of changing the rules if we don't like how the rules are happening with us currently. So that's my opinion.
Ms. Wooden?
In regards to the application that's already in, my question is, did anyone else know? In other words, Wheat Ridge United Neighbors had done this traditionally. We didn't have a policy or a procedure traditionally. So the chamber submitted an application along with evidently CFIW, but did anyone else know that it was open for application?
We don't solicit applications.
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
Just to give a little bit of historic background, last year was the first year that Wheat Ridge United Neighbors did not host the forum, with the exception of 2009, I believe, Enterprise Wheat Ridge hosted the forum. Last year, there was interest expressed by the chamber to host the forum, so I reached out to Nancy Snow and Dot Miller and asked if they wanted to co-host the forum. And then the Wheat Ridge Chamber submitted an application. Wheat Ridge United Neighbors didn't express an interest in pursuing a co-hosting situation. This year, I reached out to both Nancy with Wheat Ridge United Neighbors as well as Dot Miller with the Wheat Ridge Chamber, and Dot responded pretty immediately, and I have not heard from Nancy. And then earlier in July, that's when Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge had reached out expressing an interest, and that's where I connected them with Dot to work out whether or not they wanted to do some type of co-hosting situation.
I guess my point is that we just haven't had a procedure in the past, and so these two groups have stepped forward and said they'd like to host it. However, I don't know that any other groups knew that they could apply. And so that's my concern with that. So I also am in support of option 3, which is League of Women Voters, and for future years having neutral parties. And as far as League of Women Voters, they do produce for the state the Blue Book for the election. So as far as them being a neutral party, that is who produces the Blue Book for the elections. And I would support having the League of Women Voters, and I even like the idea, and I don't know that we could get it done this year, but I do like the idea of a professional third-party moderator.
Can I ask a quick question about who has applied? You've got an actual application in hand from?
I have a partially completed application from the Wheat Ridge Chamber. The direction that I gave to Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge and the Wheat Ridge Chamber was, if you have a desire to co-host, I'd like you to jointly submit an application, which would provide me with detail, Sarah and I detail, that we need for the logistics of the event.
Ms. Davis?
When is
So
the
there is
deadline?
no established deadline. To Councilmember Wooden's point, we don't set a date and then push the information out that we're soliciting applications. Certainly, that's something that we can do if council desires for us to do that in the immediate short term. And again, that deadline would have to be sometime mid-August. The date that the chamber and the city landed on is October 3rd. That's the date that currently works for the chamber. It currently works for staff or videographer first and foremost. So that's the date that we're working towards right now.
Okay.
So we don't
Thank
have a
you.
deadline and when any applications would come in? Okay.
No.
Ms. Davis?
So I have just a couple comments. I mean, I'm fine with the chamber or League of Women Voters. I think either one is acceptable. My understanding is we don't have a policy that says we're going to accept the first application that comes in, correct? So us going against policy that's not the policy that first comes, first serves.
Correct. We don't have a policy that states that. I reached
Okay.
out to Dot Miller last week after the study session and gave her a heads up. So she's aware that council's having this discussion this evening.
So I think that brings up the whole process issue that like Genevieve brought up, that did we reach out appropriately to the folks who might be interested? And we also just have a partial app, not a full app. So I think from a process perspective, unfortunately, we don't have really a set process of there's a due date. If you don't meet the due date, then you don't get considered, and how you get considered, or first in, first out kind of situation. So, I mean, I do feel that the chamber and or League of Women Voters would be acceptable. I don't feel that the Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge would be acceptable, and I feel that way because as a part of the election 2 years ago, they did register as an issues group, and they did support candidates instead. I know there were a couple complaints sent to the city clerk about that they're an issue group endorsing candidates. So I just don't feel that that's a biased group. And that's my opinion. I know we spoke to Mr. Dahl about that 2 years ago and also registered concerns with the clerk about that. So I do feel that there's a little bit of a perceived bias. There might not be, but unfortunately, I think, perception is what people believe. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And I also, one other thing that I wanted to talk about was that I believe like the chamber wanted to start this at like 5:30. I don't think that's acceptable. I think we need to put this at a later time. Previously, we have done 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I do think that needs to be the time we do it. And regardless, I think that we need to hold that to whoever does it. If it's a chamber, League of Women, Wilmore Davis Elementary School, whoever might do it, that we need to hold them, that they hold it at a time that's reasonable for our community to attend, not just attend half, but if they want to attend the whole thing, that we have it at a time that people can make.
Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, I agree that if we don't already have a policy of first in, first out, or anything like that, however, and we only have a partial application, however, with Heather reaching out and discussing that with Dot Miller, who had already asked, if that could be something she could do in the future, I think that kind of tells her that she's been accepted to do it. But I would not want her to then go find co-hosts. I'd want it for the chamber to just do. And, I think that maybe under moderator guidelines, we could also put in that the time cannot be any earlier than blank. If these are guidelines that we want, no matter who is doing the forum to follow, then we should really consider, like, what do we want everybody to follow, right? Do we want the city to approve the questions? Do we want to make sure that the time is at a time that we know our citizens will be able to come and be involved, or at least be able to be home and be on the TV? Those kinds of things we probably should put in the moderator guidelines. But again, because we don't have, as pointed out, we don't have an actual rule, then I suppose we're not going back on rules, but we would kind of be going back on words. I'd prefer to let the chamber do it this year and then League of Women Voters next year. But I'm not going to cry if it just ends up being League of Women Voters either. So I think they're both really good options.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Urban would have his opportunity.
I think we just need to back up a minute and recognize that on the July 17th study session, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about discussing this, even though it wasn't on the agenda, which I had some concerns about, and we thankfully cut that short, even though it seemed like it was going to go on for a little bit longer than that, and I appreciate that we pushed it to this special study session, but I do have some concerns about the fact that we are now having a special study session to discuss this issue, as much as this is an important issue and we need to sort of vet this out and have this discussion. There are a heck of a lot more important issues here in the city that we need to be dealing with than whose farm we're going to have this dog and pony show at. And as much as, you know, it concerns me as to who's hosting this, I could care less who hosts this. It's just, it doesn't matter, because no matter who hosts this, I know they're going to do a good job, because they, the League of Women Voters, the chamber, it doesn't matter who hosts it, they're going to do a good job. Because if they're in this chamber, they're going to treat it with respect, and that's just the fact of the matter. So I sort of object to the fact that we are having this discussion here tonight, because of the fact that there are a whole host of other issues we should be discussing, but the fact is that we've chosen to have this special meeting here tonight, the study session, to discuss this, when in reality there's nothing really here to discuss. And the fact is that the chamber has already provided an application. Yes, it is not fully complete, and I get that it needs to be completed, but the fact is that this is another example of people who don't like those that have applied, and now they want to change the rules midstream. And that, to me, is, I think, another example of the fact is that we started this discussion last week that was not on the agenda. We moved it to a special study session, and we're spending time discussing something that frankly doesn't need to be discussed. And if it does need to be discussed, and it is that important, why weren't we discussing this well before the election came up? That to me is what's concerning about this, is that there are, by my numbers, 674 people waiting for a permit right now, but we're talking about who should be hosting the election forum. And frankly, I really don't care who's going to host the forum, because whoever is going to do it is going to do a good job. Because that's what we expect of them to do, and that's the end of it. So to me, it doesn't really matter who hosts it. It's going to get done well, and it's always been done well, so let's just move on with it and be done with it. I don't think that we need to spend as much time as we're spending discussing this, and if the residents are looking onto this and think this is an important issue, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that this is not a topic that we need to be spending a whole lot of time on, and we need to move on from this.
This is a council of 8, not 1, and Mr. Urban does not dictate to the rest of us what we do and do not discuss. We did ask for a special study council session. That's what this is, and that's the purpose of it. And no, we do not know that a good job will be done. We aren't guaranteed that. That's why we're discussing it. I fully support the discussion of this topic, because we don't know how these things are going to go. We didn't have guidelines. We just established that. We didn't have rules we're breaking. We had no guidelines. We just established that. That's why we're talking about it. And I fully support a further discussion.
I want to add, I think this has also happened because for many years, United Neighborhoods did it, and this never came up before. So what's come up now is that there's a gap, and we need to have some kind of a policy as to how we fulfill this. And the candidate forum or the election forum or any of those are pretty important to our citizens, and I think that we have a duty to make sure that it occurs in the most honorable way we can. Mr. Fitzgerald.
I just was going to say that there is 2 months now, and we're not breaking any rules, so I think there's plenty of time. I don't think that we made any commitments to anyone who has an application or a partial application. I'm aware of at least one other group that has expressed interest, but did not know that this was happening. And I think out of fairness, we need to make sure that everybody who is interested had a fair chance, a fair shot of doing it. It's obvious that a registered special interest group, a political group, should not be involved in this process at all. And so when we talk about these groups, especially if we have the League of Women Voters moderate the actual session, what is the role of the sponsor? Is that sponsor different from the League of Women Voters? I would certainly support the League of Women Voters, but I guess I'm not quite understanding. Are you saying that instead of the League of Women Voters being involved at all, you'd rather have the chamber be involved?
I think for this year, because we're just establishing and discussing that we have no guidelines and we have nothing to follow, I think for next year it's appropriate. Make these guidelines clear, make sure we get it out there that, if it's the League of Women Voters, it's the League of Women Voters. But I think for this year, since you've reached out to the chamber and their understanding, it's just our word, right? Nothing else but our word that we've called them, we've committed, they've committed themselves. I'm not hearing where Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge has decided that they are going to co-host this, because it sounds to me like that's the concern of a few of you on here, is that Citizens for an Inclusive Wheat Ridge wants to co-host this. And that's not what you want to see, but that's not what I'm hearing. I'm just hearing that it's the chamber. And I think for this year, the chamber showed an interest. They did the paperwork, which isn't all the way complete, and I think we need to honor that, at least our word, and then set these guidelines for next year and make sure that everything's clear, everything's in here, and everyone knows about it. That's where I'm coming from.
Mr. Goff, do you want to say something?
No, Mr. Fitzgerald's going.
I was going to try for a consensus, if everybody's ready. Is everybody ready for this?
I don't know if we're ready, but go ahead.
If the chamber is going to do this, who would the moderator be?
Typically, it's up to the organizing, sponsoring, hosting organization, whichever term you use. The city could certainly work with the chamber, and we could decide that we're just going to go ahead and pay a few $100s to have an outside, more of a TV news anchor, such as an Ed Sardella, be the moderator and take care of that point of decision. So that way there's no perception issues surrounding who the moderator is. Again, like I mentioned, League of Women Voters typically will find an individual, a community member in adjacent communities to come in and serve as moderator for their forums. That's what they've done in the past.
Mr. Goff? I keep thinking you want to say something. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I think Ms. Hoppy has a question first.
Okay.
It's more of just a statement in the guidelines, and I'm hoping that whoever makes consensus will make a consensus to also accept the suggested guidelines. But in the guidelines, it says city employees and city officials appointed or elected and candidates running for office or anyone associated with the candidate, such as a campaign manager or treasurer, may not serve as moderator. So I think that that's pretty clear. I would like to add into the guidelines the city-approved questions and that we have a specific time. And so when that consensus is made, I hope that we'll add those guidelines and put some detail into that.
Okay, I'd like to try for a consensus. I'd like to use option 3 as the consensus, that we designate a neutral third party such as the League of Women Voters to host the forum this year and or in future years, and that we incorporate the guidelines as brought forward by Councilwoman Hoppy.
That being the addition of city-approved questions and city-approved start time and date.
Would you consider the chamber a neutral third party?
I have no, I don't distrust the chamber, I guess.
Wait, you've already made a suggestion, so, yeah, you have to vote that up or down. You can't just sort of, All right, this is for option 3, with the addition of certain rules and regs that we have input in
That
there,
were
such as
outlined.
hours, moderator, questions, et cetera, all right?
So consensus on that.
All right, so,
I'd like to amend.
just make your own consensus.
Okay. All right.
Failed, I think. So it failed, so new.
Okay. I'd like to get a consensus on, for this year, honoring and using the Wheat Ridge Chamber with the addition of city-approved time to start and city-approved questions
And the other guidelines under number 4?
and the other moderator guidelines.
And
And no co-host.
And we'll look for a process for the future.
We'll look for a process for the election of 2018.
We can do that. Okay. We have a consensus to ask the chamber to do that?
Do we have?
Stipulation for hours?
I'd like to ask for another consensus. I'd like to make a consensus that in the year of 2018, we go with option 3, designated neutral third party, such as the League of Women Voters, to host the forum for future years.
Maybe they could rotate or something.
No, let's just, this is on the floor. Let's take this.
Let's solve it.
Okay. Consensus has been made for 2018 that the chamber, the League of Women Voters will be asked to moderate, and you have something here?
I just want to kind of go back to our council code of conduct, because I do think that when we have things that we want to discuss as a council, I think as a group, we did decide that that was something that we would support and respect one another for those discussions. I do think that there's probably plenty of times that some of us are sitting here feeling like, why are we talking 12 hours about $2,000 when we make a motion for 1.5 million in a heartbeat? And I just feel like we shouldn't be felt belittled or that our need for discussion is irrelevant and that we're not looking at other issues. So I think I'd like to go back to our code of conduct that we promised each other and be hopeful that we can go to study sessions and talk about things that more than one council person requested on the agenda and not get, feisty about it from folks.
I believe that ends it. Anybody else? Nope. There it is.